So it was small. You were pedaling it out of your booth at first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was making it out of my basement.
That's cool.
Yeah. Sort of.
I think it's fucking cool.
Yeah. The tattoo artist would think it was cool. You know, the government probably would.
Yeah.
But
fuck the government.
yeah. I was saying that like I got my machine off of eBay and then I threw away the steel tubes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, this is so expensive. How can they afford this?
Right.
You know, and then I figured out you can autoclave them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But
you didn't have an autoclave, of course.
No, I switched to disposables, I think. Something like that.
My kit that I bought off eBay came with the combos.
Okay, yeah.
Like it was like those like skinny tubes. They were like the size of like a pen, like a little bigger than a pencil.
Yeah, I know you can't hold them.
I did the first tattoo ever on my friend. We were in some kid's kitchen that was like the first kid we knew that had his own like apartment, you know. And it was like where the island or like the part of the counter meets the other part, and there's like a little gap, and it was on his foot. And my friend leaned on each counter and stood up. And I went on my stomach in a prone position and tattooed his foot with like a single needle or a 3-liner, a black tribal.
Nice.
And it took me all day. Like,
of course.
And we were drinking Bud Light Platinums while we were doing it.
The Platinums, really?
Yeah. It was like when they were new.
Yeah.
Because we were like young kids and it was more alcohol.
It was those metal bottles or whatever.
Yeah. It was disgusting.
Terrible.
They almost tasted like alcohol instead of beer, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember just doing it, and I mean, it wasn't even that bad, honestly. That's the funny thing.
Really?
I think I was using because it was just tribal,
just beginner's luck, and
like it didn't even fall out that much. Like it was like pretty.
That's lucky.
It was like, it was.
Yeah.
And I remember like using a flat mag.
Oh my god, yeah, and just cutting them up.
Yeah.
I know. I did that. The first shop I went to, we started off with Browns. That's all he would let me use, and then I was like, I see these guys using these flats, man. You know, and mags weren't really a thing back then so much.
And this was in 2001, you said? This
would have been in like 2003. And man, I went sideways with that thing and just like chopping people up.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
I remember like learning how to tattoo. The guy telling me you could make a line with a mag. Like, you know, people used to do like weird stuff. But mags at one point were like the new... That was like a technological breakthrough almost a little bit.
Especially the curved mags.
Yeah.
You know, because during the flat mags, you had to like be very, you know, very vertical and like make sure everything was on, you know, you weren't dipping one side more than the other.
Yeah, because the way it like dimples into the skin. I always use like my fingers as an example of a curved mag. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because as it like the tension pushes, it almost becomes like even.
Right.
In a way.
So then when they came out with the curved mags, or when I discovered curved mags, I was like, that's a fucking game changer, you know. But what I didn't realize up until probably, I don't know, like 8 years ago or something, is that I didn't make all the proper adjustments from like when I started tattooing to what, like when curved mags came out and rotaries and pens and stuff like that, and the better inks and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was tattooing still like very like perpendicular with a curved mag, which in my opinion now I definitely tilt it more on its side for my curved mag.
Yeah, sure.
And then I was still tattooing with rotaries how you would with a coil. I would like push lines, you know what I mean, instead of pulling lines. And I remember I saw this friend of mine, vegan Matt. I saw him.
I've met him before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I saw him pulling a line. And I was like, hey, man, just so you know, like, that shit don't stay very well, you know, and like, you should push lines kind of deal.
When you say pull the line, you mean like almost like towards you?
Yeah. Like,
instead of like angling it into the line and pushing it?
Yeah, just drawing it back instead of like, you know, pushing it forward kind of deal.
Yeah, I guess because with the coil, if you pushed it forward, the spring would kind of give. Is that what the theory was?
Yeah.
But with the rotary, it would be better opposite because of the...
Correct.
Yeah.
But with a coil, it was... At least back then, like we had very limited information, you know, you were trying to figure things out kind of deal. So whatever you figured out was like gold. And I remember I figured out like, don't pull a line, you know, you should always push a line.
Right.
But then I didn't make that adjustment when it came down to rotaries. And there were a lot of things that I didn't make the adjustments to. So it was kind of like I was behind the ball, and then all these new artists who started with rotaries were doing things different, and they weren't taught, back then. So they were pulling lines and they were fine. And now you have people that are taught and they're using rotaries and they're just fucking killing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
well, it almost seems like people learning how to tattoo now, there's not really much of like a technical struggle. Correct. It almost seems like it's like if somebody can like create this piece of art on paper or canvas, like the tool is not like a barrier of entry.
Right.
It almost seems like it's just like cool learning how the skin functions.
Yeah.
And then just doing that on the skin instead.
Right. Yeah. I genuinely think you can learn how to tattoo in probably the basics in probably 6 months.
Yeah.
I
mean, it makes sense.
That's just for the experience and like, but as far as like the knowledge goes, you can literally learn in, I don't know, in the time that it takes to read Reinventing the Tattoo, the book, you could learn tattooing. You know what I mean? Like, you'd have to memorize all of that, but like you could learn it. Where when I started, like, you had to learn it. You had to figure it out.
Yeah, it was like almost like learning how to be a car mechanic or something, right?
With no instruction.
Because you had and your instruction might have been some bitter dude who chain smoked Marlboro Reds and, didn't like the idea that you were learning anyway.
Yeah, like, that was literally my beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I took that guess. It wasn't just a random one. Right? It was based on observation.
Yeah.
I'm kind of happy because I can't say I'm from like the old school of tattooing, but I caught the tail end of that in my place. And I couldn't be happier, though, in a weird way.
Yeah.
Because there's like a little bit of like, and I'm not like one of those guys that cares so much about like, I mean, I respect like the tradition of anything, like just as like a human. But I still think that that's like a cool thing to experience, like that the fact that there were people that were like a little bit like safeguarding, or, I remember when I got my first rotary machine, like the owner of the shop wasn't like happy because cartridges were just new and they were only being made by T-Tech at the time. And this other guy that was a guest artist would come and use them. And I remember like the owner and no one else there did. And I that guy was doing the best work. So I was like, well, if he's using them, I want to get him. And they're like, no, you need to learn with this stuff first. And I remember thinking like, why?
Right.
It's kind of like, like learning how to do like long division when there's just like a calculator sitting right there. And I was kind of like, it doesn't make any sense. Like I kind of, and he was using like not an iPad, but he was using a Wacom tablet.
Sure.
And like a laptop. So
he was like, he was current. He was progressive.
Yes, at that time.
Yeah.
This was like 2013, 2012, And I don't know if he was the only guy doing it, but in my environment, that was like the first exposure for me.
Right.
And I remember just thinking, well, I want to do that. You know what I mean? And at the time, like Paul Acker and these guys were like, the guys, and they were doing like all this realism. And I remember thinking like, I want to do that.
Sure. Yeah. And it's crazy because like you see, like when I was tattooing, my mentor would be like, you're not doing that right. I'd be like, okay, well, how do I do it? Not that way. That does not help at all. You know what I mean? Like that's, I already figured that out because it didn't work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So now maybe offer me some insight on how I can.
Right. But now you have the opportunity to like take seminars and like, people are, the bad thing is people are bouncing around a lot and stuff like that. But at the same time, it gives you exposure to like new artists and stuff.
Right.
We have guest artists and like we YouTube and there's so many avenues to learn how to tattoo.
Yeah.
And what we kind of figured out is like, it all works.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So like, just do it.
Right. It's like the pros and the cons of the progression.
Yeah.
I feel like the maybe the old school offered like a little more sense of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but like, I don't know, maybe like some tradition or pride or like a little bit of like something, right? Am I wrong? Because like I always like I appreciate that about like anything when you learn like the history of something, like the pioneers, like Tony Hawk skateboarding and like inventing the moves and like there was those people didn't have those resources, so they're like real trailblazers, if you would, right? Whereas like now, like I guess you would say in tattooing, like the cat's kind of out of the bag, and and that the positive of that is that there's a lot more like opportunity for people, or opportunity, as like a business person to maybe capitalize, or as like a student to learn. But then there's also like the cons of like the oversaturation, or like people getting into it for the wrong reasons, or exploiting.
Sure. Yeah. I think we haven't really, I think a lot of people think that we've hit this like level in tattooing where like the application can't get any better and like all this stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of, I don't know, ignorance in a sense. You know what I mean? Because like we have no scientific nothing about tattooing. We still are very curious about like how it goes in the skin, how the needles are making it, stay in the skin. What does this rash look like? Why are we getting these bumps when, you're tattooed in the sun too much and stuff like that? Like we have all these theories, but we don't have like a lot of scientific like evidence and research. You know what I mean? So I think once we start getting like real scientific stuff going on, it's going to open, like we're going to see all kinds of possibilities. If you ever think like we don't use mediums. So like I just came out with those mediums. They're not really mediums, but they kind of are. But like we're selling glycerin and, witch hazel is in bottles as mediums. But like linseed oil, right? We can put that in our body. Why wouldn't we mix, I bet we could use oil paint for tattooing kind of deal. It probably wouldn't go in very well. You know what I mean? But like certain pigments and certain things that we've never thought to like put into the body or anything like that. I don't even think we've even touched that,
Well, it's interesting, and I'm glad you bring that up, because someone as innovative as yourself, it kind of leads me to my next question. I know that you've come out with a new color set, the Empire inks,
right?
And you took like a very different approach with the colors, where it was more emulating like that of oil paint palettes,
right?
But not. I think you went, from what I understand, a step further and talked about like the opacities of each color. Why don't you explain some about that?
Right. So like in oil painting, obviously I have an oil painting background. So in oil painting, like I didn't do anything different. I just kind of like, a lot of my stuff is just kind of bridging a gap, So in oil painting, you have, what the light fastness is, how long the sun will take to beat it up, basically.
You've explained that to me one time when we were on the phone. So you call that, what is it? Light fast. Yep. So that's the measurement of how long light will break down that pigment over time.
Right. So I'll nerd out with you for a second.
Yeah.
So
I'd love to.
There's a blue wool test that you can do. Mm-hmm. And then so basically that exposes the pigment to equivalent to either 10, 50 or 100 years, depending on what you're going to do.
So this is a light test that emulates those amount of years.
Correct.
Via that light. So you could do 10 years of light exposure in a short amount of time.
Correct.
Via this test.
Yep.
And you could do that in different light year increments.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So what tattooing does is like, we're very limited of what we can put into the skin.
So why is that? Is that just because of like health reasons, or is it because of how it holds in the skin?
Mainly the health reason, but how it holds in your skin and how your lymph nodes will dispose of it will also take into account.
Okay.
But for a much better, it's mainly for the sun. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like just kind of thinking outside the box, like oil paints, they'll tell you the light fastness. They'll tell you how long it. So if it's a higher number, it's probably a lower light fastness, so like orange would be like a 7 or something like that. And
is that just orange pigment in general?
It's a certain type of orange pigment. So like if you have like phthalo blue, right? The phthalo blue is going to have a light fast number to it. And I don't know, it's a 2 or something like that, or a 1. So that means it's very light fast. It's very good. And then you have cadmium orange, which we're not putting into the skin because it's cadmium, but like, let's say for instance, and that's probably like a 6 or a 7 or something. So
higher number is worse.
Higher number is worse.
So that means that it would fade with exposure to light much faster.
Correct.
And this applies to oil paint as well.
Correct.
So what about
all pigment?
So let me ask you this, which is essentially pigment is the basis of paint, tattooing, or Okay. So like a master painting in a museum, what kind of light fastness were they working with some of those like archival, like, the Mona Lisa or some?
Sure. Well, certain colors are gonna, they didn't have the technology or the experience back then to be able to figure that out. So some of the colors are definitely gone. You know what I mean?
So the painting I'm seeing, like if I go look at, I don't know, let's just say the Mona Lisa again.
Sure.
That might be much different than it was when it was painted, or something from the Roman Empire.
It is definitely different.
And that's because of the light fastness.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
You've never, I can promise you, like Sargent's paintings and Da Vinci and all those guys,
right.
like their paintings probably, especially Rembrandt, their paintings probably looked a billion times better than we've ever seen it.
I wonder if anyone's ever like recreated, like by restoring the light fastness digitally, of what it may have like predictively looked like.
Yeah, because we can probably figure out, like back then, we didn't have carbazole violet or something like that. So, this would be this type of purple or something like that. That's what they would have used back then.
Right, because it's what, like, we could deduce what was available based on the resources or whatever.
So we can tell the potency of it and how chromatic and vibrant it was and stuff like that.
Okay, so now when dealing with tattoo pigment, light fastness plays a factor as well.
It does, but it's kind of curious that like we don't play with that enough. So we're always shooting for like the best light fastness. Everybody wants like, I want my tattoos to last forever and all this stuff. But I think these days, like everybody's so much different that what I would like to do eventually is like put together a set of like, we want to put the light fastness on there. I have to actually get the colors tested. But if you want a tattoo that only lasts 4 or 5 years, because you're just not a commitment kind of person, just use inks within that realm of like light fastness. You know what I mean? I don't know. You could like basically put together a set and say like, if you use this blue and this orange and this yellow and this red, the tattoo will only last 3 years. You know what I mean? So it kind of gives us like a little power for like those people that want a little dinky tattoo and they're like not really committed. You know what I mean? Like,
but would it work like that, or would it just fade out in like a bad way, but you'd still see it some?
You could do it from either particle size or from light fastness.
Okay. So then let's go through that. So all tattoo pigments vary in particle size?
Yeah.
Is that by the color or is it by brand?
Probably both. I mean, we do have control over the particle size, and we want it to be a certain size at least. You know what I mean? The smaller the particle size, the faster that your lymph nodes are going to dispose of it.
Right. So from what I understand, the reason why tattoo ink even stays in your skin is because the particle size is large enough to be suspended.
Correct.
Without your, I guess, lymph nodes or immune system, or is that the same? Like doesn't flush it out.
Correct.
Okay. So is that why like some colors will fade quicker than others? Is that a particle size thing, or is that a light fastness thing?
Both. So if your body's disposing of it quicker, it's going to be a particle size factor. And if the sun is just beating the shit out of it, it's going to fade, but it's not going to be gone.
So the particle will still technically be there scientifically.
Correct.
But it won't longer
have any color.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's pretty interesting. So you could kind of play with both.
Yeah.
But at what point does the particle size affect getting the ink into the skin from a technical tattoo standpoint?
It definitely does. So like Starbright's Canary Yellow, one of the best yellows out there, right? Mm-hmm. And it just flies in. It's so thin and it's such a small size. So like it takes a lot of pigment, a lot of small pigments to make it do its thing, for it to go into the skin. But it goes in a little too easy sometimes. So it starts spitting all over the place and
right.
And you don't want to go over it twice. You know what I mean? So
the pro is that it goes in well, but the con is that maybe your lymph nodes will flush it out of the system quicker.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So when creating pigment, then would it be finding the perfect balance?
All pigment, that's what it is. So if you look at like, let's say oil paints, for instance, if you look at Old Holland, right, and then you compare their cadmium red to Winsor & Newton's cadmium red. They're different. And it's because like you want to find that sweet spot of like, how fine do you grind it? You know, the particle size. Should you use safflower oil, or does it perform better with, walnut oil or something like that?
Okay.
Or linseed oil. So each pigment is going to have like its chemical reaction, and that's in tattooing as well. It'll have its own chemical reaction and how it bonds to it, basically.
Okay. So the tattoo pigment is the same.
Yeah.
So when you're producing tattoo pigments, so you're trying to find the perfect particle size per pigment color.
Correct. Yeah. Just so that it has its, its fluidity and its just how well we want it to perform. We do want it to perform different than like oil painting or acrylic painting or something, but we want it to perform how it goes in the skin, and then also like how it heals and how long it'll stay for.
So then what would be the reasoning for like a larger particle size, say on like a red, and then maybe on, and I'm just making this up, but like a blue might have a smaller particle size? Is it because you can get smaller with the particle size on that particular color because the light fastness is higher, so it compensates?
Yeah, you can play with it that way, or just the usability of it,
Okay.
how fluid it is. So sometimes, and that'll be with brushes too. So if you want something to like really stick to a brush, you could use like a Klinsky sable brush, which is usually for like watercolor, but I use it for oils. And the pigment's going to really like adhere to it just because it's that type of, it enjoys, adhering to that kind of deal. Where if you have like hog bristle, it tends to slip off really easily.
But that brush would be beneficial for a smoother blend, maybe.
Right. Yeah. If you're trying to lay paint on or something like that, and you want it to fall off and not push the paint, then yeah, I would use a hog bristle, where the Klinsky sable would like move everything, because it's like sticking to it basically.
Right.
So in tattooing, you could look at it as like, I remember, have you ever used Stable ink?
No.
So way back in the day when Stable first came out through Workhorse Irons, I did not understand it at all. It was terrible. I literally thought I'd never tattooed before. Literally, but like I felt like I'd never tattooed before. I put this green in. I was doing this red-eyed tree frog, and it was terrible, man. It just did not go in. I'd jam it in and I'd wipe, and there was just no ink. So I called BJ Johnson, Soba, and he's like, "Oh, send your machine in. I'll retune it, and you should use textured needles." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird." Like that's a lot of adjustments for me to make just to use somebody's ink. You know what I mean? Kind of deal. But what it was is that like Stable back then, I don't know what it is now. I don't even know if it exists anymore. But it was definitely, well, I'm going to say this, and I hate when people say this, powdered ink, right? Everything is powdered ink. So it kind of, I'm contradicting myself right now, but everything is powdered ink. But they advertised it as powdered ink. And back then, basically, powdered ink meant that it was made in a blender in somebody's kitchen. You know what I mean? They didn't add glycerin to it all the time, or they weren't changing the particle size necessarily. It wasn't like a science like it is now. So they had these like different size flakes, and they had these different, this one would be really runny, and this one was like toothpaste, so you had to change all these different things. If you're going to put in the yellow, you'd want to use a textured needle. If you're going to put in a magenta, you were going to use this needle and this setup. And it was very confusing. So it obviously never took off. I don't think most people used it. But it was very like difficult to use compared to what people call homogenized ink, which is just a process. So that's what we do basically. And when you homogenize it, you're suspending it really well, and it's binding together really well. So it's not like some of it's thick and some of it's thin, or anything like that. All the particle sizes are exactly the same. Like we have these strainers that we put it through that make sure that like the only thing getting through this is this size particle, and then you get this like collection above it that didn't grind properly.
And then that's like disposed of then.
Correct.
And that's to create consistency.
Right. Yep.
So the homogenizing process, you're saying it's like a process to make a consistent particle size.
Well, yeah, correct. And also to like bind it and carry it at the same time.
Okay, so take me more through the homogenizing process. Like so pigment, how does it come originally? Like
as a powder form.
Okay, but at that point it's already it's too large to be used right like that.
It depends on the pigment.
Okay, so in relation to tattooing.
Well, it kind of depends on like the color that you're using, basically. So sometimes they're grinding it for the most part for you. They're breaking it up. If it's rose madder comes from a flower, you know what I mean, and titanium dioxide, and like so they're taking these different things and they're making it into a powder form, but they don't care what particle size it is. They're just like,
so they're inconsistent.
It might be, depending on who your supplier is and stuff like that. And then you take that and let's say if you're going to use a phthalo blue or something like that, you would want to grind it to a size that would perform well for a phthalo blue. It might be a huge particle, who knows, you know what I mean? Or the problem is when it's smaller, that sucks because you can't make it bigger.
So say you were to get pigment of the same color 3 times, is it different each time you receive it?
Depending on the quality control of the manufacturer. Yeah.
Okay.
Or not the manufacturer, but like where it's sourced.
Okay. Which leads me to the $1 million question that I've heard and was never 100% sure on, and I would like to ask you. Now, I've heard that the main pigment distributors or people who make this pigment, that there's only like 1 or 2 in the world.
Yeah, pretty much. There's more than that. In America, we have probably 3 or 4.
So all pigment for all tattoo inks, oil paints, acrylic paints are coming from these 3 main pigment manufacturers
in America. Well, so you might be asking, there's 2 ways to take that question. So like if you get a certain yellow, this yellow might be, indigenous to this. I don't know if that's the right word, but it sounded good. Indigenous to this area, and it's only found in that area.
Okay, so even if it's an American manufacturer, they're still sourcing the raw material to create that pigment from that region of the world that only has that.
Correct. And then they bring it over, and then they'll break it up, and sometimes it's a rock, sometimes it's a flower, sometimes it's whatever it is.
So even our tattoo pigment we're using is using organic materials such as rocks, flowers, insects.
Depending on, some of them are organic, some of them are going to be synthetic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when a pigment is synthetic, what would that be made of?
That's just made in the lab so like you have like cadmium-free cad red. You can't have a cadmium-free cadmium red. That's impossible.
Because there's no, why you're calling it something that it's not.
Correct. Yeah. So,
but what is cadmium? Cadmium?
Cadmium? I think it's a metal.
Okay.
I think.
So essentially that pigment purely is small particles of a metal. Or
actually, maybe it's not a metal. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on what cadmium is.
Okay, well, let's use something else for example. Like you said some are from flowers.
Right, yeah, like let's say rose madder is from a flower, right?
Right.
So that's going to put off a certain color, and you're only going to get that color
from that flower.
And
that flower may be cultivated best in a particular region of the world in a particular season, maybe.
Correct. But you can try to make something that acts like that
in a lab.
Okay.
So our tattoo inks that we're using now, does it vary from brand to brand if they're using synthetics via organic material?
Probably.
Yeah. Or is it a blend of the two?
It'll be a blend for sure.
Yeah.
Most likely it'll be a blend.
Is there a pro and con versus a synthetic and organic?
Well, certain things we don't want in our body, you know what I mean? But we do enjoy that color, you know what I mean? So if you want something that appears to be like a cadmium red and it acts like a cadmium red, you know, it's a warm red. And when you mix it with white, it makes this kind of pink or something like that. You mix it with this color, it makes this. You can make a synthetic that would essentially act that way, but it would never be true to it. Mm-hmm. There would be no way to actually reproduce it perfectly.
Are there ever situations like where a tattoo ink manufacturer would use the organic material like in batch number, 750, and then they would switch to 751? And no,
I don't think so.
So a lot of the companies would have like a consistency with their formula.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot to reformulate something.
Okay, so once they have a formula, they stick with it.
Most likely.
Yeah. Unless for some reason they couldn't get their hands on it or something.
Now that's the problem. So because there are only 3 or 4 companies, and there's one company that makes black, right? All
black pigment.
Yeah, just there's a giant company that makes it.
Now there is an array of black pigment, or it's one?
There's an array. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get bone black, you can get carbon black, which is generally what we use. There's all kinds of different blacks.
Right.
So there's mainly like this one company that makes blacks, and it depends on like what you want to do with it. We'll say like they'll kind of like get you roughly there for the most part. And that's what you buy it towards that. And then you take it from there and you kind of like make it closer to what you want or exactly what you want. But these companies, the 3 or 4 companies, they will not sell to the tattoo industry. 100% will not.
Now, is that for all pigment or just black?
All pigment.
So I've heard that before, and that was the question I was going to ask before, and I think maybe you told me this years back.
In New York, yeah.
Yeah, so so you own an ink company, right? You need pigment to make your ink.
Correct.
But they won't sell it to you.
Correct.
So and that goes for all tattoo ink manufacturers.
Every one of them.
So, but then how are we in an industry as large as the tattoo industry using all these inks, but the company that manufactures the pigments won't actually sell to the industry?
Yeah, they don't care. But
it's happening.
Yeah, because we're sneaky and we're tattoo artists and we're pirates and we don't give a fuck. You know what I mean?
So that's the thing I wanted to say on here and understand that. And I don't know if many people know that all the ink we're using is hanging on by a thread. Like essentially, it's everyone who owns an ink company is getting pigment to create their formulations via some backdoor way.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it causes a ton of problems that way.
So let's Fusion Ink, Eternal Ink, Empire Ink, Radiant Ink. All these companies, by all rights, shouldn't have their hands on the pigment to make the ink.
Correct.
That's wild.
In America.
In America. Okay.
So
why in America?
Because we sue each other too much, probably.
So if I had an ink company and I was based in, I don't know, Canada, then they would sell to me no problem.
Maybe. They might not even look into it.
But why do these manufacturers of these raw pigments have a gripe or don't want to do sales with the tattoo industry?
The liability. And the fact that there's not a lot of scientific research. Okay.
So they just don't want to be involved with this business type.
Correct. So there's no actual, most industries, they'll if you want to start a nail polish business,
right? You
could contact them and say, I'm going to start a nail polish business. And they would send you, a catalog that has lines of nail polish stuff. And then you can mix those things together and make your own colors or whatever you want to do. But it's pretty much nail polish paint at that point. You know what I mean? And then you're going to get it and then you'll tweak it a little bit and you'll package it and then you'll sell it, right? We don't get the opportunity for that. There is no tattoo ink line through them.
Right.
So we have to find something that has like, it doesn't have defoamers in it. It doesn't have all these like extra additives and surfactants and stuff like that. So we want it to be as pure as possible. And then we want to add the ingredients.
Correct.
But we use water, and most companies are going to use alkyds or something like that. And when you use water and pigment, they don't match well.
Like, is it like almost like oil and vinegar?
Kind of.
They don't mix.
Yep. So we have to grind it, and you can grind it different ways. You can grind it with a ball mill or sand mill.
So you're grinding this pigment even finer than it comes.
Correct.
To get it to suspend in water.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. But all doing this while you weren't even technically supposed to be purchasing it.
Correct. So do you remember when we started adding white to the gray wash? Not for the whitewash, but like just now when you look at the gray wash, it's got a little bit of white underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
That's because we got cut off from our supplier. And so then like I couldn't get that pigment anymore. I could get a different pigment, and I had to make it perform, kind of like we were talking about the synthetic. I had to make it perform the same as what we did before, but my old pigment was more opaque and it was more a little bit cooler. So I added white, just a tiny little bit of white to it
to get the opacity,
and the coolness.
To try to match the
correct
prior equivalent pigment.
Correct. So it took us probably 7 months to reformulate everything. So you got to keep 7 months worth of back pigment on to make it through until you find another distributor or another way to get through to the distributor.
And when you say another way, obviously I'm sure that's something you don't want to disclose.
That one I can't.
Yeah, and I figured that much. But just to assume, anyone in the industry of creating and formulating tattoo ink is doing something in a backdoor way to obtain pigment.
Correct.
And that's just a fact.
In America.
Yeah.
I think in Italy, they're allowed to, like Panthera, I think they're allowed to buy pigment straight for it. But they're, like, you look at Italy, man, like their food is their McDonald's is like our fucking Red Robin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like their quality is much, much higher, and they make you do a lot of research, and a lot of, chemists are developing this ink, not somebody like me that like had a oil painting background. You know what I mean? So like they're doing this like at a much higher level. So the government is probably going to be more, like helpful in that scenario. And also probably the pigment manufacturers,
Sure. It's just mind-boggling to me that like the future and current state of our pigment in our industry relies on like backdoor deals.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
It's I don't know if a lot of people know that. Like,
yeah, they probably don't.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, so in my opinion, I think that we've kept the cost down quite well for that. Because anytime something's illegal or not, it's not that it's illegal, but like you can't get it, it's hard to get. What happens? The price gets shot up. But tattoo inks have always been made by tattoo artists, so we're not ripping each other off. You know what I mean? When we get the new regulations and the new laws and stuff, it's going to bankrupt a lot of the tattoo artist owned companies.
So when you mention that, you're saying that you're anticipating new laws.
There will be new laws. The regulations are coming.
Is that was that like that coalition or whatever that I was hearing about, where they were going to eliminate anything containing like a certain blue or something?
Yeah, phthalo blue and so green 7 and blue 14 or 15.
And that will happen.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about the colors. In Europe, we're basically, America said that we're going to probably follow suit for the most part Europe's regulations. So
what will that mean for tattoo artists?
your ink is gonna suck for a while.
So it'll suck. Why? Because you won't be able to use a certain pigment.
Because you're not going to be able to use certain pigments, or the regulations are just they're going to be a lot more stringent.
So the pigment
Fusion just came out with their gradient color set.
Yeah,
that I just saw. And I haven't talked to Jason about this or anything like that, but he said that there's no glycerin and there's no alcohol in it for Mokra to be able to abide by the Mokra rules coming.
So he's preparing.
Yes, everybody's preparing.
So, but no alcohol or no glycerin, what does that mean for the function of the pigment?
Well, the alcohol is our it's our preservative basically.
So it's like it keeps it sterile, if you would.
Correct.
Okay.
But in Europe, I know that the dates are a lot lower. So like the pigment can only last so long in the bottle.
And that's because it doesn't have the alcohol.
Probably.
So what would be the pro of removing something that keeps it safer longer?
They're saying that the alcohol is bad for the body.
But is it?
I don't think so. I'm not a doctor. I can't say that. I don't know.
Right.
But as far as my research, no. There's probably dangerous levels. So what we did with ours is that we outsourced like very, very high quality alcohol, like very high quality. So it was funny because when we released those mediums, we saw comments on there like, "Oh, I'll just go to my my local dollar store and get alcohol and witch hazel and all this." It is not the same thing. It's not even remotely close to the same thing, and that's the difference. So like that's how we're kind of combating it right now, is that we're trying to develop a very pure, very like strong alcohol, or at least some kind of substitute,
Sure.
because I would still like it to be as sterile as possible,
Right. But that's what I don't understand. If in Europe they're removing the alcohol, is that just their way of saying like use this quick and get rid of it?
Probably, yeah.
Because it seems like I don't. I couldn't mean, like I said, I'm not a doctor and I don't know much about alcohol and its qualities, but it seems to me like that would be something you were doing as a safety preventative measure to keep the ink, I would imagine, from like maybe growing bacteria or something of that nature.
Yeah.
So removing it is a way of them saying use this quicker before that's even possible and then get rid of it.
Correct.
But that almost leaves more window of opportunity, in my opinion, for someone to use ink that is now spoiled because they're being cheap. Like,
Sure. Well, with it, just along with anything, you're going to have you're going to come out with rules, and they're going to be very harsh. When you open a business, the first thing you do is you say no rules. I hated the last place I worked at, and I'm going to do it different, and there's not going to be any rules. And then people start showing up late, and they start canceling appointments, and you start implementing these little rules. Okay, this one. So it's kind of opposite here. They're going to start off too stringent, and then they're going to have to probably relax on it once they feel the full, fury of it.
So you think that this will affect the pigment options, like these regulations? Like, will there be no blue or cool colors that you need?
I'm not very well versed with the Mokra laws. It's very confusing, and it's a lot of politics, and there's a lot of bickering and fighting, and nobody seems to get along, and nobody's saying anything. It's just the tattoo artist summed up. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Honestly, I'm so fucking confused. I let my chemist deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to follow it for the most part, but then I get a lot of misinformation, and then I spread misinformation, and that sucks. So I've been trying to hold back on really
even commenting on it, or
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the most educated person that I have worked around would be Mario.
Okay.
He seems to
he was leading, was it that coalition? I forget what it was called.
Yeah, the CTS.
Okay. And what that was to fight for the rights or the real information, or I never really understood it too much myself.
Me either, and I was part of it. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's some really good intentions and just people not working well together. And it gets very confusing when that happens.
So what was the initial intention of, like, I guess you would say the government, right, is the one?
Yeah.
What is their like blanket statement as far as implementing this? Is it the safety of people?
Yeah, pretty much.
But
okay. So from my understanding, it's not so much of the safety of the people as it was. It's that what it's going to be. So they were saying like, well, people are living longer now. So like, you could have reactions later than it could give you cancer if you have it in your body for 50, 60 years, where people were only having it for 20 years, or something before.
Right.
And then also the main thing that I took from Switzerland when we went there was that it's from the laser.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah.
And I've had, being a little bit of like a conspiracy guy, that lasers, this was just my opinion, have become like almost a corporate kind of business. And I was almost wondering if there was any part where their lobby was influencing it more, as if they wanted to like overtake the safety on their end.
Correct. And my argument in Switzerland, and this is what I actually asked the person, was we were around first. Why do we have to change?
Yeah.
And they didn't give me an answer.
Like, it would almost make more sense to me being like more educated on getting, especially in today's day and age, getting a good, properly well done, well thought out, yeah, and then not needing laser. Like, we're almost at a crossroad here where there's like enough wonderfully great tattoo artists in the world and many of options that maybe just like education on getting the proper tattoo.
Correct.
And being like self-aware enough to put something like, permanent on your body.
Right.
That maybe like we could almost do away with laser.
Yeah.
More so than change the ink so that somebody can be fickle and laser their tattoo.
Correct.
Like, so from what I deduced, and I like to consider myself like a relatively intuitive person, my first thought was that these corporate laser fuckers were like, hey, it's not safe for me to laser this tattoo, so let's
change the pigment
so that we can remove them,
right,
and make money.
Yeah.
Because like,
that's what it sounded like.
That's what it sounded like to me, and that was just in a brief discussion with a guy who owned a laser company. You know what I mean? Like, I came to that conclusion in like, I don't know, 35 seconds.
Right.
Kind of sounded weird because I've never heard of somebody having an adverse health effect from a tattoo.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, you could be allergic to certain things.
Well, allergic or like skin, bumps or something like that. But I've never heard of someone getting like cancer from a tattoo.
Well, that's funny because during that same thing in Switzerland, we asked if there were any studies to show that that it was cancer causing or anything like that. And they said no. And then another dermatologist stood up and said, but we do have studies showing that it might actually stop skin cancer. The tattoos are acting as a barrier.
Oh. Yeah, but then why? I wonder why that wouldn't be weighed in on. Is it that the laser, because from what I understand, laser companies are being bought out by a corporate conglomerate currently.
Correct. I that's what I heard too.
Yeah. So it almost seems like maybe they have like the capital to make such lobby, towards.
Yeah, and that was the idea of the CTS, is that we were all trying to get together to put our money together to go up against lobbies like that. What I mean? So,
but it's interesting because why would they want to sabotage the precursor to their business?
Because we'll comply. You know what I mean? We're not going to just give up. We'll still do it.
And it's interesting for me, like, as much as I recommend lasering, like, I think that almost put a bad taste in my mouth, like for lasering in a weird way.
Sure.
That I kind of personally am seeing lasering nowadays as like kind of like I don't want to say the enemy, but like it's not like
fuck yeah,
like
I'll say it.
Yeah, like fucking make a decision. Like, I mean, I understand if you have like a tattoo from like the 60s and it's like sucks, but like I'm almost more on the team of like to just get another like a new tattoo.
Right.
I'm also in the tattoo industry and I don't give a fuck about my own tattoos that much. And it's like before I laser this arm, I'll go get my back tattooed. You know what I mean? It's just like is what it is.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's like this weird laser push, Yeah.
For sure. And it's hard because they do have more money than us.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
They're going to get it. They're going to get what they want. Especially, they have more money than us because we're not coming together. So
how will this affect me? Say these things come into place. Am I tattooing with a half palette, with a limited color palette?
Probably.
Yeah. And from what I understand, it like removes most cool colors.
Yeah.
So it's like tattoos are just black and gray or warm.
Yeah, because phthalo blue is going to be the most common blue that we're going to use. And almost all the blues, all the cool blues that you're going to use in a tattooing palette are going to be made with a phthalo blue.
Yeah.
So that's your cool blue. And that's, all the greens, everything.
Right. So tattoos become warm and black and gray.
Yeah. Or you can use a Zorn palette.
What's that?
A Zorn palette.
What's that?
Zorn is, what is that? It's yellow, black, and red.
Yeah.
And then, but you can make it you can make it look like it has those cooler colors in there.
Correct.
Black is a cool color.
Right. But Bobby Cupparo's tattoos don't exist. These laws come into play.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not going to get the vibrancy and how chromatic your stuff is not going to happen.
Yeah. And this is coming. You're saying.
It is coming. Absolutely.
Like 100%.
Yes.
When?
We don't know. It's been put off year after year after year, and it's getting more stringent, and they're getting closer to it.
Is there any chance it doesn't?
No.
100%.
It's going through.
So I should start thinking of alternatives.
Yeah. Something.
Yeah. I mean, this should be a message to anyone listening to this.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know that many people really know about that.
They're not listening, and they haven't been listening the whole time. And that's partly our fault, as manufacturers, because the ink manufacturers aren't getting along. Not all of them. You know what I mean? So like, if we can't come together as one voice, nobody's going to hear us. And then we got certain people that have been screaming it loudly, you know what I mean? And then, people like me that I'm just like, whatever, I'm just going with the flow. You know what I mean? Like, I can't afford to, I'm too small to like, fuck with these people kind of deal. So.
Right. I don't know, man. I don't think that's, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, I don't really know what their expectations are. You're talking about an industry at one time that was basically just pirates. You know what I mean? Like that they wouldn't follow the rules no matter what we tattooed on the house.
I mean, that's why I got into it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that way anymore.
Right.
And they see that.
Right.
So
I wonder what's to gain, like, from creating this. Like, what would be the, like, what's provoking them to, like, try to essentially sabotage an industry that otherwise has no ill effect on much of
Have you
anything.
ever done cosmetic tattooing?
Say that again?
Have you ever done cosmetic
I
tattooing?
never have, no.
It's like $60 for like a half ounce
Yeah.
bottle.
So that's where we're heading.
Yeah. And that half ounce bottle is basically watered down tattoo ink.
Right.
So
and we're heading there.
Yeah, it's going to get more expensive for sure.
And less quality.
And less quality.
So tattoos are just going to come worse.
For a stint. Yeah.
For a stint.
Yeah.
You say that because you'll think that there'll be enough proof to be like, what is the point of this?
I just think we'll evolve into it somehow.
Now, I did hear rumors about someone talking about something like this one time where there will be potentially backdoor ways, though, to evade this. Like, in the sense that somebody's creating drawing ink.
Yeah.
That would be essentially the same old tattoo ink.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we could label it as drawing ink, but you wouldn't get any promotion. So, like, if you tag us in your tattoo, which you couldn't, you know what I mean? Like,
but you could, because you could just say this drawing ink sends me ink because they this artist, when he's not tattooing, draws with it.
Right.
You think there'd be enough oversight to come down on every tattoo artist?
No, they're just. But we're gonna play by the rules. There's no way around it. There's too much. You guys won't necessarily like get into trouble, but the manufacturers would. That would be like prison time. You know what I mean?
Right.
They could say it would be practicing medicine without a license.
But this is like one of those situations where it's like making making a drug illegal, or like as opposed to having it legal and regulated. Like, let's use like prostitution in Amsterdam as like an example.
Yeah.
Like, it's like people that are legally allowed to do it. They're like tested, they're regulated, they're like signed up for. So that means like someone can go engage in these activities and be like feel good about it because it was like a regulated industry.
Sure.
As opposed to like going on the streets of Detroit and, getting a prostitute that's going to give you like, a multitude of diseases, right?
Sure.
So it almost seems to me like this kind of regulation might even provoke more of like a pirate style. Like, what's to say some dude's not going to start formulating ink in his fucking bathtub like they did, back in the old tattoo days?
Sure. And you could, and there would be fines if you get caught, and there could be jail time. And I know that I think in Europe somewhere they're trying to make examples of tattoo artists to scare them straight and make sure you don't use these colors and these inks and stuff like that. And they go through, and some people were like, pouring it into different bottles and stuff like that. But they're going to crack down. I don't know. The only time the government didn't win was, the prohibition, basically. But outside of that, they pretty much have figured out how to they're going to win. They'll make us comply. I think.
Right. And essentially ruining the industry.
Changing. Yeah.
But you say that, but the ink will be watered down.
The ink will be different, but it's hard to say if it's going to be better or worse, because just like I said, like everybody always wants like their tattoos to, hold the longest and stuff like that. But not everybody does actually want that. Some people would want a temporary-ish tattoo,
So will these regulations make all tattoos semi-temporary?
Possibly, yeah.
Will it destroy a permanent tattoo?
It won't be the same. I don't really know how to answer that. I just know that it won't be the same. So it depends on your outlook and, your approach to it. And I think if anything, the tattoo artist is good at adapting, and we have evolved great, like honestly, we were talking about like a bunch of ex-cons and bikers, and now it's a legit industry, you know what I mean? And we're professional, and some of us are paying taxes, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. So like it's getting better for sure. And I think that's what we're going to see I think it's going to go down a little bit. Obviously the quality is going to go down. We're all struggling to like get to these regulations, and develop our inks to that style. But I don't know. I really don't know. I think it'll get better.
Yeah. It's wild.
Right?
Yeah. It almost like, it almost makes me like feel like I should start figuring out a plan B. I mean, like essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be hard to make tattoo ink anyways. We used to do it before you could buy it regardless. We used to make our own needles. We used to make our own machines.
So is there a possibility that it returns to that?
Yeah, I think some people are going to return to
that.
But
that's not legal?
It might be. You just can't sell it to somebody else, but you might be able to use it yourself. Yeah.
Oh, so you might have like a plug that is willing to sell it. Like it'd be like drug dealing.
Oh, you can just get powder, pigment.
And they even still sell that.
Yeah, you could go to Michael's and get powder pigment.
Oh.
That's
kind of fun.
Yeah.
I might like this.
Yeah, I make my own oil paints. I enjoy it.
I might go do that tomorrow just for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make your own tattoo ink. There's a learning curve to it, and it kind of sucks to figure out.
Hey, luckily I know a guy.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, you'd have to figure out how to mill it and bind it, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, you hear the old guys talk about that all the time. That's the only ink they had.
Boiling ink on the fucking stove and shit.
So now let me ask you, but see, that's what I'm saying. You're putting the quality control into the person's hand.
Right. Yeah, they don't want you, and they know most people are not going to do that.
You know what I mean, though? Like, wouldn't it be better as it stands than just sending out potentially thousands of people boiling ink on their stove?
Right. Yeah.
So that seems counterintuitive to me.
I don't know what their intentions are. I don't think they're very realistic about it, and I don't even think they're trying to be. It's been going on for so long that like it's different people that that come into the job and they're like, okay, I'm new here. We're dealing with ink regulation, blah, 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 like catch me up to speed. Oh, I think we should go this way. So there's some back and forth kind of that way. But realistically, like, I don't know what their intentions are. I really don't. I know that they're being swayed by very, very, very big companies that have way more money than us. So they're definitely being swayed.
And you would deduce that is the laser companies.
I think the lasers have a lot to do with it. I think there's another player that's even bigger.
And you have no idea who that is?
Yeah, I do. I'll tell you one of these days. I'll tell you privately.
Okay. Yeah.
Just because I don't want to give any misinformation. It is literally just my opinion.
No, I can respect that. Yeah,
so,
for sure.
And probably the opinion of like a lot of other
ink makers.
Maybe. Yeah.
It's wild, man. I mean, I'm glad we're talking about this. I really don't because I didn't understand the severity of it. I've heard of this a few years ago.
Sure.
And I thought like, you know what I mean? Like that's no way. You know what I mean? Like that's not going to be the case, Yeah. And then you're sitting here, as and what would I say? Ink manufacturer, or what would your title be? Or
I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just a geek.
Well, I mean, I'm a fucking geek too.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So, I mean, now that we got into all that, and I might have some follow-up questions about it as we go on, but so you started tattooing in 2001, right? You said you started scratching.
Yep.
And then at what point did you get into making ink?
Right away, in 2001.
So you were making it because you needed it to use at that point.
Yeah, I took baby oil and
like Johnson & Johnson baby oil.
Yeah, I took baby oil and then I burned it. I took a paper bag and collected the soot.
Yeah,
and I mixed it with alcohol,
like jail style.
Yeah. So I mean, literally since day one.
And that's what you were tattooing with.
Yeah.
And it worked good at that time, or
yeah, it worked. It turned green eventually. But yeah.
So right away you were just were you doing that out of necessity at the time because you were just scratching?
Yeah, but also like out of fascination. I've always had a fascination with pigment.
Right.
So
okay. So then you're doing that in 01. How long are you using that pigment?
Even after I was in the shop, I was doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I learned how to boil it, and it was even better.
So boiling what? The soot?
Yeah.
And then what do you do? Strain that?
Yep.
And then you would use it the same way, but it was what does boiling it do?
It basically, boiling is going to make it adhere together better. And it's probably going to take a chance of like bacteria growing better. You know what I mean? Which I didn't consider back then.
Right.
But yeah, boiling is going to make it darker for sure, and it's going to make it makes it darker because all the particles are like very close to each other now.
Does it create like a paste when you're done?
Yeah.
And then you would water that down or glycerin that or
no, I just put alcohol in it and maybe a little bit of water.
Yeah.
So I can't remember if I put water in it or not.
Get the right consistency.
Yeah.
So you're doing that for a little while, and then at what point do you start? When is Empire Inks born?
That was I don't know, 2011.
Okay.
Something like that.
So you were always fascinated with it, and in 2011, you're like, I'm going to make this a business. Like, I'm going to really, or were you still just trying to formulate your own, like at that time?
Yeah, I just had enough people ask me for like my gray wash, and I was doing like a ton of seminars at shows, and that's kind of how I booked out the shows. Was like I would do a free seminar, and I would need clients for the seminar, and then they would post it, and then I'd get a whole shit ton of fucking people wanting tattooed. And then I would, people would ask me what inks I was using, and I would just tell them like I just make my own, and eventually enough people wanted it, and they were like, man, I love it, but I would go to the convention with just my set. So I just started bringing more sets. We'd be like, oh man, can you bring me a set next time? And I'm like, sure,
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, and then from there you just led to way, and you just
eventually I just put a label on it.
Yeah. So it was small. You were peddling it out of your booth at first.
Yeah, and I was making it out of my basement.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, sort of.
I think it's fucking cool.
Yeah, the tattoo artists would think it was cool. The government probably wouldn't.
Yeah,
but
fuck the government.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it started. And I had friends in the ink industry and stuff like that, and like, I don't know, just things went that way for a reason, and I really enjoyed it. I loved making oil paint. That was like one of my favorite things.
Were you doing that even before Empire Inks was born?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just like that's just something that naturally attracted to you.
Yeah, for some odd reason, like everything in my life has always been somehow evolved around like watching paint dry. Whether it was paintball or if it was oil painting or whatever. It's always had to do with pigment.
Yeah.
So I always had like a fascination with it and where it comes from, and like Indian yellows from goat piss. That's cool.
What's that?
Indian yellow. It's a color oil paint.
Oh, okay.
They make it out of goat piss.
Is that real?
Yeah.
Wow.
They used to. I don't know if they still do.
But they would like sterilize it somehow or way or another, or not even.
No, they just made it that way, and then they noticed it was kind of a cool color.
Would they like dry the goat piss and then like scrape the particles off or something like?
Probably.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's like probably 100 million questions I could ask you about pigment.
I love pigment. It's very interesting to learn.
Yeah.
I get pretty confused on it because there's so much. Every pigment is something different. You know what I mean? But it is very interesting just how it reacts and how it works with each other, the chemistry side of it, it's pretty interesting.
So when did you go from just kind of, for the lack of a better term, like pirating ink and making it in your basement and peddling it to tattoo artists to kind of like legitimizing yourself as a, one of the more well-known?
I think it was around 2011, and I started getting more aggressive with it in probably 2014, something like that. There was a couple of years that I was just messing around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the first time I got like a location for it to make it in, like actually make it in bulk, I think that was in probably 2013, 2014, something like that.
Cool. I think I was using it shortly after that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I was always about it and using it, and then I just never did black and gray.
Right.
Yeah. But I still have a set. Like when I do black and gray, it's always with your ink. But I just never.
Yeah, and that's honestly kind of how I am now. I don't do many black and gray tattoos, so I'm just doing colors.
Because I was living in New Jersey, and at the time I was a young tattoo artist. I started in 2013, and I think it was like 2014, 15. I started doing like decent tattoos in the area, and I wanted to work like in the best shop around, and that's when like Sean Foy had his own shop, and I didn't know the guy from A Hole in the Wall. I just knew him from Instagram, and I DM'd him one day. I built up the courage, and I was like, hey man, like I see you, like next town over, and he had like 11,000 Instagram followers or something, and I was like, I want to come work with you. And then he was using the Empire, and then I was using it, what I mean? And
that's awesome.
It's so funny. And then I remember the time you guys like sponsored me or whatever. And then I never did a black and at some point no one asked me for a black and gray tattoo for like 10 years.
Right. Yeah. And that's pretty much how that is kind of how it went with like everything. You know what I mean? It just kind of like evolved into what it did. And we just started collecting friends, you know what I mean, that were using it, and people would, it just kind of grew that way. It was interesting. It's been a really fun journey for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now I see you guys, you make the color set.
Yeah.
That's like relatively new, right? Like in the last like year or two, maybe
a couple months.
Yeah, like all that new.
Yeah.
So where do you see the future of Empire Inc. going?
I see. I don't know, which is weird because I always have it. You know what I mean? I always have a long-term goal, and I always see exactly the direction I want to go. With Empire, I think I'm more interested in the education side of it and working with other artists and stuff like that. I really enjoy like the team, and so that to me is more fun than like the business side of it.
Yeah.
So as far as like the inks is just it's really just a platform for me. You know what I mean? Like I love it. So that helps, I think, a lot.
I think so.
Right?
Yeah. Usually when you interject a little bit of love into something, it's like
yeah. But I wouldn't have cared. I owned an ink company or a tattoo machine company before Empire. You know, and I've owned salons and bars and stuff like that. So like I don't really care where it goes. I more or less I enjoy the platform that it gives me, and the fact that I can like come here and do stuff like this with you and like meet cool artists and give them a reason, and it kind of funds all of us. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like if we want to go to convention, I just gather up 12 guys and say let's go to a convention. Their influence sold enough ink to buy the booths. You know what I mean? So like it's kind of just like a free ticket for me and the team to like go through our journeys. You know what I mean? And hang out and have fun.
I mean, how cool is that?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I think if more people in the world operated from that mentality, we might be living in somewhat of like a utopia.
Right. Yeah. And it is, but that's what it is for me. Is it's a lot of fun. You know what I mean? And there's from Timeless Tattoos, which is my shops, compared to Empire, it's way different. You know what I mean? Like Empire is nothing but fun. Yeah. There's no stress to it. It's just, and that's when we bring people onto the team or when I'm talking to people out and about, they always ask me like, how do I get sponsored? It's literally just my friends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they and even if they don't use it and they don't want to be sponsored, you know what I mean? Like I'm still their friend, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's just a way to like fund us through this, you know?
Yeah. What a cool outlook.
Yeah.
I always felt that way with like a sponsorship and all that stuff too. Like I feel like young tattoo artists think of it as like such like a thing, but like what I've learned like being in the tattoo industry long enough now, it's like, it's kind of just like knowing people like genuinely or like meeting somebody, you know what I mean? It's not so much like, oh, you know, like it's like this weird, I think when it is that way for me, like I put like being genuine and all that stuff usually like the highest thing, you know? Yeah. Like, so I think that's just a cool outlook, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Like, I don't like I used to joke around and say, I don't care if it's the best tattoo artist in this place or like the janitor.
Right.
Like like whoever is just cool. Yeah. Is who I'm like drawn to. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the hard part about the team is that like, some people have, and they've since left, but like some people have been upset that like I've brought on people on the team that like weren't at the caliber that they were at and stuff like that. They're like, oh man, you're diluting it and you're adding too many people and all this stuff. And it's like, that's because your goal was like validation. That wasn't my intention at all. My intention was just my friends since day one liked my ink. And they wanted to use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So just because like your intention with it was for validation or was for free ink or for whatever, you know, or maybe to be a part of like a grander team or something, that was never my intention. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's
quite evident. Yeah. From my perspective. Yeah.
Right. So I don't care if you're not great at tattooing, but you love art and like we geek out like you and I do, you know what I mean? Like I have faith that you'll get there eventually. You know what I mean? So like I might not share your work as much because, you know, this guy's smashing you, but I'm still going to share your work. I'm still going to invite you to the booth. I'm still going to invite you out to my house.
It's like a loyalty or just like a genuine connection type of thing.
Right. But I could also put those people like in the vicinity of who will make them better. You know what I mean? Because some of these guys, man, they're out in like fucking Arkansas or something. You know what I mean? And like there's another tattoo artist around for 100 miles how are they gonna get better?
Like their resources are so damn limited,
right?
Like that like you wouldn't even put them on that same like it's not, the trajectory is almost not as possible,
right?
For them.
So if you could put them around the right people, a lot of times, man, they come up pretty well,
Yeah.
So
that's like what you're about, and like your kind of mission, and just
right.
kind of being like the glue to a positive or cool community of people.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And I remember that too, because like I remember back, it was a long time ago, because I was still living at like this certain apartment. I remember when I was like sponsored by you guys or whatever at the time, and I forget who I was chatting with, but making like a label. Okay. Or something. They asked like everyone to make like a label for inks or something.
Right.
And I remember them, and this was probably in like 2015 or something, like talking about like the education that you mentioned and like the community or something. Yeah. I forget the exact details.
Sure.
But I remember that was the mission then.
Yeah, absolutely. That teacher-student program.
Yeah.
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 And what we were trying to do was like think of it like in a more helpful way. So like David Vega obviously has a lot of influence. You know what I mean? And Michael Perry and all those guys.
Right, right.
So if you have influence and you're going to actually like influence people to use my inks, I'm making money off of that. Plain and simple. You know what I mean? So we've come up with a program to be able to like pay the artist for their influence, So if someone's buying their label, they get a cut from that,
Yeah.
And if you're not like super influential and you're just a friend of mine, there's a place for that. You know what I mean? Like you bring it up to the booths for the conventions, and we do a retreat at my house, which is super fucking dope. So like all these different things. But we still have the teacher-student program that's on Discord now, and we do critiques, and we have like all these different sections. I really struggled with like learning how to tattoo, and I felt for a long time, I don't feel that way anymore, but I felt for a long time I kind of got the shaft on it, so I am all about teaching. I'm all about spreading information and trying to help people that like don't necessarily have the same opportunities. And that's where like I think one of the biggest things that I learned in tattooing was that the technique will only bring you so far, and then all of it after that, outside of the business side of it, is all art. And I did not know. I knew there were things about art, but I didn't know. You know what I mean? I didn't understand like what a core shadow was. I didn't understand, rule thirds and all these like things. And in order to be like really good at art, you're going to have an understanding of it. You don't have to. It's easier to like know the language, but I think it is like that is the biggest difference in jump in my career, is what I learned, like how to be an artist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know you've always put a great emphasis on that.
Yeah.
It's very interesting for me because I feel like I don't know any of that stuff.
You do, you just don't know the vocabulary. You don't know the language.
Yeah, but it's weird because I never learned it. So that's like sometimes I like wonder, and not to say that I'm like good or special or something, but like it seems like people tell me that, but I don't know why, how, or what. I just do that.
Sure.
And so maybe I understand the language, but not the language.
Right.
That makes any sense.
Yeah. but you understand that like reflective light. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You just might not have put a name to it.
I definitely didn't put a name to it. Yeah.
Right. But you obviously like reflective light. So
I think I'm just an observer of reality, and then I just understand the way I saw something, and I can almost just replicate it.
Sure.
And I don't put any word to it or something. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Because maybe if I had to explain it to someone, I would. But I think it's mostly just by looking at the world.
Sure.
Like if the light is here,
right?
Like it shines and it hits this and then it hits that and it bounces back to that. You know? And then there might be another light here and then that one's not as strong.
But you're thinking it through.
Yeah, but
some people don't think it through.
Oh no, I'm definitely thinking it through.
Yeah,
like that's for sure. Because it just makes sense. Like, but I think that's mostly how I just operate as like a human being.
Correct.
Like I'm very like, I don't want to say analytical, maybe. Like some people would label it overthinking, which I actually think that underthinkers call overthinkers that sometimes.
Yeah, I call it deep thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And I Right. I think overthinking is like a negative term by people that try to keep you. Anyway, let's not get into my trauma. No, but like but for real, like, you know, like, and I always use this example, like if you're hanging around a bunch of people here and you're here, you can only express yourself to here.
Right.
You know, like, you know what I'm saying? So like, I think that it becomes more of like, for me, it was like an observable thing. Like, it's like, well, it just makes fucking sense. Like, that is the light. And like the way light works, you could literally study it by just looking around.
Right. But some people don't even know to study it.
Right. And I definitely do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when I'm just looking at, like, you know, you sitting on the couch, I can understand, like, okay, the light's coming from there and it's hitting that, and then that green light's hitting you from there, and then creates a you know what I mean? And then there's like a temperature, like, but I don't know where I got that from though, because I never took an art class.
Sure.
So maybe that's just my like superpower. Yeah. You know? Yeah. But I guess like, you know, people like have interests, like you were saying, with like pigment. Right. For me, it's kind of like light.
Yeah.
It's like,
and that's the thing, is like, what I've noticed is that where your interest is going to be usually your strong suit. Right. Mm-hmm. But your weaknesses, so I'm always telling my kids, like, don't strengthen your strengths, strengthen your weakness. Right. So if your strength is, you know, light and shadow or something like that, cool. You can go very deep into that. You can learn a lot about it, and you can really like hone in on it.
I mean, you could spend your whole life trying to figure that out.
Right. So, but then you're going to lack in composition, and you're going to lack in edge control, and you're going to lack in values and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I think learning to like understand the fundamentals, and there's 7 to 9, depending on who you're talking to, you know, just getting a good basic understanding of that, it will catapult you much further. You know what I mean? Yeah. And being able to speak the language, this is what I'm always talking about Mike, you know, to Mike with, is that like, Mike is the same way as you. Like, he knows it, he understands it, but he couldn't, you know, maybe necessarily point out the technical name for this or that or whatever. Yeah. That's just more or less speaking the language, and every industry has their own language. So like a curved mag, that's a filbert brush. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's the same thing. They're just calling it slightly different. Right. You know,
I use only those, by the way.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I feel like I could get the same effect as the flat one with it anyway if I needed to.
Right.
Right. Like, I mean,
not necessarily, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's like the thing too, with like when people talk about like art style. Okay. I have like I get into like deep shit about that kind of stuff.
Because I do too.
Because I don't think that style is. I always relate art stuff to like interpersonal, like how can you have style if you don't know who you are? It sounds like really silly, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like it's almost like a reflection of your self-awareness, maybe.
Yes.
Like I look at it like that.
Yeah. I look at it like honesty.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Being like honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, it's like if you understand the rules or you know, like you said, maybe not know the language of the rule, but you do understand the rule. Well, it's like, well, then why can't I just bump up the contrast here?
Sure.
Or like, I know, like, you know, in this shadow, there's not going to be light. So, you know, the light source is warm. There's no light there. So then that's probably going to be cool.
Sure.
But then it's like, if I have like a big, strong highlight here, I can like make that highlight more yellow.
Correct.
Than it is.
Right.
Because that little highlight is strong, like in a presence, even though it's small.
Sure.
But it's strong. Then I can put like more of like its complement in purple around it, and that little bit of yellow balances out a lot of purple.
Correct.
Because that's like a, you know what I mean? Like
but you're thinking it through, and you're accepting the consequences of your change, right? So I think there's a difference between style and incompetence.
Yeah.
So if you can't pull a straight line, and you only do curvy lines and stuff like that, that's not your style.
No.
That's an incompetence.
Of course. Yes.
So I think you should learn the rules first to be able to break
100%.
So that you can understand the consequences that, like, okay, if I do bump up the contrast, this is how it's going to affect it this way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm okay with that. Or I particularly, maybe I even want that.
Even if I were to break down my tattoos, I just take everything to the extreme.
Sure.
If there's a shadow that's like a little less than black, I'll just make it black.
Okay.
If there's a highlight that's like not purely like on the far end of like the value spectrum, I'm just gonna put it to the further end.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like I just going further with each level.
Right.
You know? And that's just what I do. Like, and I know I'm doing it. It's like conscious.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that came from. You know what I mean? It's just
honesty. You know? You're doing it because you want to, because you find it visually.
Because I can.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Yeah. I think that's the way. And that's, for me, like, these last couple of years has been really good for, if we talk about style, I feel like I've found more of my style because I'm being more honest of like, I want to do it this way, especially in painting. I'm not selling my paintings. I've never sold a painting. I'm never going to.
I've never have either. Yeah.
So I don't want to. You know what I mean? I want to be able to like have fun and do what I want and not be commissioned and not worry about like, oh, is this person going to like it? You know, if your client gives you free reign, like completely free reign, the first thing you're going to ask them is like, give me something, give me direct. Is a skull okay? You know, you're going to ask permission basically. I've never asked a canvas permission, never once. You know what I mean? I'm going to paint what I want. I'm going to do it how I want. So one thing that I do that is super fun, I don't know if you've ever tried this, but do a painting that you will not show anybody no matter what. Like literally no matter what. You have to promise yourself you will not show anybody no matter how good it comes out. You will basically burn the painting right afterwards and do the painting and see what it does. And from in my experience, those were my best paintings, which sucks because you can't show anybody.
Right.
But the second that you're like, okay, if it comes out good enough, I will show somebody. Yeah, I'll post it. Then you're instantly like going to make decisions based on whether people like it or not.
I know. I think we talked about this off the podcast a little bit. And it sometimes I feel like that a lot of the motivation for creating art comes from the gratification or the dopamine hit.
Sure.
It's like, when is the last time you made, I mean, you clearly have, you know, made a piece of art just because you wanted to.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your decisions are way different.
I bet.
Just like completely different.
What a cool exercise.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would make sense. Yeah. That's something you got to do alone.
You have to do it alone.
I wonder if you did it with another person together and because you might even do it for that person.
Yeah, there's something about that subconscious in you that's something that says like, I'm being judged. You know what I mean? I will be judged or something along those lines.
Then you have to ask the question like, how much of art is for the end game?
Right.
I feel like tattooing has a lot of that in it, especially with the social media and all that.
I have a ton of fear in tattooing.
Yeah.
I genuinely, this is a cop-out, I know that, but like I genuinely do not think my tattooing will ever be as good as my painting because I have too much fear. I have too much fear of like disappointing the client. I have too much fear of like making a permanent mistake, of overworking them, or, you know, mainly them not liking it, you know?
Yeah, and I think that adds to the conversation of how hard tattooing really is. Like, even if you've like mastered your craft, like at the end of the day, you're still like essentially collaborating with someone.
Right.
You're thinking what they're thinking.
Have you ever, I don't know if this is for you, but for me, anytime I like really don't like somebody, it's always my best work. I fucking hate that.
Maybe that goes on to what you're saying. Maybe because for that moment you gave up on the.
Yeah, I don't care if they don't like it. I don't care if I'm hurting them.
Yeah.
You know, I back off a lot because of the person's pain. I'm always trying to take like a nicer road to it. And if I don't like that person, there's this lady that like, she was just talking shit the whole time about our stepson. And she was saying like fucking horrible things and like embarrassing things to her friend and stuff like that. And it's the only person I've ever kicked out of my chair in mid-tattoo and said, get the fuck out of my shop, basically. But I was doing so good because I was listening. I was fucking hating her. And I was just like, fuck you, bitch. You know what I mean? And I was just drilling her.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to do it this way. And I got about 3/4 of the way done and I just could not stand anymore. I just kicked her out. Yeah. And at that point, I was like ready for a lawsuit. You know what I mean? Like, whatever, it's fine. But it was like a really good tattoo. And it was because I just genuinely did not give a fuck.
Yeah, I didn't have that happen, but I had where I felt that way, and the tattoo healed in like a day.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
is, I think, where I learned about efficiency.
Yeah, how fast. Yeah.
It's like, hey, why putz around?
Yeah.
Like red is from here to here. Just put it.
Yeah. The most direct route.
Yeah. So I almost, like, I tell that to people all the time. I tattoo like a traditional tattoo doing realism.
Right.
You're just doing like mini blends, but it's like,
yeah.
Like,
I remember watching you tattoo the first time. I was like blown away.
That was like, years ago. I think I probably did. But I think I do the same. It's just very hard.
Yeah.
Direct.
Very, very direct.
Like,
the little round shaders. I was like, what?
I literally, from here over here is this color, and then it fades out. Just like, 1, 2, 3, boom.
Right.
Like, like, why am I even gonna like?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like basically like packing a trad rose.
Right.
And that petal is like black fade, red fade, but I'm just doing that in micro.
Right.
Yeah. And it's like, and then I learned that when I hated a guy, and he came back the next day and it was like healed already. Like, in like those 3-day, like it's already like no peel, like just like, and I was like, wait, I didn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And it came out perfect. And then other times I'm like sitting here putzing around because I think I care more.
Right.
And it was like worse.
Yep.
So that's kind of where I learned that.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's just like, what am I like? Just do it.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, I should have kept that same mentality.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Or even just like a half of it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. But I don't know. I have a hard time with it. And, it's something that's just always held me back from tattooing and just,
But you almost paint more than you tattoo. Yeah.
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 You paint every day?
Yeah.
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 See, I should paint more, man.
I do an hour a day of art no matter what.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Just to have and sometimes it's photography photography is my greatest love for sure. Painting and tattooing definitely would come secondary to that. But I do believe in like a muscle memory, and I do believe in like efficiency for that kind of stuff, and just repetition,
Yeah.
So that's with like the whole still life stuff. I did one a day. If you look at my Instagram, it says one a day on the little story things.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, I didn't post them every day, but I did one every single day to a point of boredom. And then when I would get bored with it, I would be very efficient with it. And I had a very good understanding of it. And I could basically do it out of my head. And then I would do it so much, I needed to change it. So I would start off trying to do it like very photorealistic. If you look at the beginning, they're very photorealistic, very tight and like kind of boring. You know what I mean? And then as you go through the process and you start seeing them, now I'm starting to like play with edge control, and I'm starting to like, oh, I'm going to make this taller because I want it to fit the canvas better, and like I understand light and shadow, and I understand all this stuff, so I can manipulate it, and then I'm like, oh, I want some wispy stuff, and so it just kept evolving. But doing it every day, the boredom creates, is the creativity, basically. Like it breeds creativity is what they say. It's fucking true, man. When you're doing it and you basically do it with your eyes closed, you can either quit and just walk away from it and just never do it again, or you have to adjust it somehow. You have to challenge yourself or change something about it. And it just kept evolving. And if it was a flip book, man, it'd be fucking cool. Like you could see like the evolution of it,
That's sick.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what I have to do more, because I kind of got into it for a little while, and I fell out of like just doing fine art outside of tattooing.
Sure.
I feel like it's really important because it's where you start like figuring out like different blends, or
right.
Because I think with tattooing, you're, like you said, we always have the challenge of like dealing with somebody.
Yeah.
You're kind of collaborating, like you have like a pressure.
Right.
You know what I mean? Somebody's paying you this money, so like there's a little bit of like a service
sure
involved. Whereas like when you're free on a canvas, you can kind of just do, what you would purely do.
Just literally have fun.
Yeah. And I said that on another podcast episode. It's like, when is the last time you did something for fun with no like means to the end?
Right.
Because even I've done like paintings, and I'm like thinking about how it will be received, or how someone will like it, or like whatever. And it almost is like kind of defeats the purpose maybe of doing it in the first place.
Sure.
Right. Like,
yeah. In your case, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we're in a professional painter's case, that maybe not be the case.
Yeah, because
you know?
it's like they're living.
Right. So I always try to look at it like, I'm an artist. I'm not a tattoo artist. I'm not a photographer. I'm not a painter. I'm just an artist, and I enjoy sculpting. I enjoy pottery. I enjoy literally anything artistic. And I wanted to learn art that I could translate into whatever medium. And of course, you got to learn the medium a little bit. But like, if you're learning photography, it's all the same fundamentals. It's all the same everything.
Like lighting and contrast,
value, composition, rule third, like all that stuff, edge control, everything. It's all the same. The only difference is now you have to learn a camera, or you have to learn a tattoo machine and skin. You know what I mean? Well, camera has 3 settings. You know what I mean? Like, that's the core of it, is 3 settings. You can go into white balance and like further than that, but like the core of it basically is 3 settings. And I hate it because, you know, I shoot a Leica, and people, they'll be like, "Oh, it's, what kind of camera do you have? That's an amazing picture. What kind of camera do you have?" And all this. And it's like, you go ahead and use my camera. We'll see how amazing that the picture comes out.
Because there was a lot more in it than just taking the picture.
Right. Even if you're a photographer, you know, and you know how to work a camera, that doesn't make you a good photographer.
Right.
You know, like, there's the art side of it. And, you know, if you look at like Neil Leifel's photography, or somebody like that, or Steve McCurry or somebody, like, they're artistically, they're fucking paintings. It's a painting with a camera, you know what I mean? But like, they're following staggering objects, and like how they place the faces, and how everything's leading from one to another and stuff like that. And like, just like a Rembrandt painting, you know what I mean? Like, so, but they can capture those moments, you know what I mean? Or in pottery, they're taking in consideration of color theory and stuff like that. Man, I have all the same ingredients, but they have ingredients, you know. In sculpting, man, that shit's super hard, you know.
I mean, you're manifesting something in the 3D space,
right?
It's pretty wild.
And one wrong hit, and it's done.
I've never done it. I mean, I do the ZBrush.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I personally have gotten more into like digital art.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But like that, again, some form of art, you know?
But it's all the same principles. You just have to learn how to use a tablet, or you have to learn how to use the tools of it. But if you learn light and shadow, and you learn, you know, value and composition and color theory and all this stuff, you could technically bounce from one industry to another seamlessly. Well,
it's even true, and it's not that I'm a photographer, but like, I've been known to like take an iPhone and take a picture of like, you know, my girlfriend or something. And,
sure.
And I've even had them say, "Oh, your camera takes better photos because you have the newer iPhone." And I was like, no,
it's not that.
I actually understand the light source.
Right.
And I understand like the composition of what's around me.
Correct.
Because I do that in my tattoos.
Yeah.
If like a tree is hanging in from the corner, I might put a rock on the bottom left corner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's literally that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, having the education allows you to like get it every time. Yeah. So if there is that tree up in the corner, you got that big dark spot, you do want some symmetry. You want a little bit of balance to it and stuff like that. So,
or maybe you want it super unbalanced, but it's intentional too.
Correct.
But I think it's all about your intentions, maybe.
Right.
Right.
And if you're educated and you understand that, like, why you would want to do that, then you can do it every time.
Right.
You know what I mean? But when you're not educated and you're just like, "Oh, I took this picture. This thing looks dope. And then you go take another picture. I watch people do that all the time. They'll take a picture, and they won't make any adjustments, and they'll do it again, and it's like, nothing changed, buddy. You know?
No, every time I take a picture, it kind of sucks because when I take an iPhone photo of somebody, I get them this dope photo, and then they take it of me, and it's like this horrible. Yeah. And I love when people don't understand how, like, at the edge of the frame, how things curve, like stretch, because they don't understand how like the actual like optic works. Like, it's like little things like that. Like, I'm not a photographer, but like I just understand the tool a little bit. Like, you know,
and that's the point of it, is that like learning the art side and getting, if you want to be good at tattooing, get good at art. You know what I mean? And then get good at tattooing.
Yeah. And that's when I like raise it more. Like you were saying, like I am an artist. And like I almost feel like I am like, yeah. Sometimes I get weird and go even further. It's like I'm just like a human.
Yeah.
And maybe that is an artist, but like in the sense of like, you could almost take that knowledge and apply it to like something even more relevant, like so different. Like it's just like, I think just the ability to understand, learn, and manipulate tools
and observe.
Yeah, like you could almost take that to like, I could probably learn accounting that way.
Sure.
You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Like it's like it's almost the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you take that same concept and you could pretty much apply it across it.
Yeah, it's almost like you're your own god.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. My wife hates that shit, man. But like honestly, I feel like you give yourself your own limitations.
Yeah.
And if you treat yourself like you're capable of doing something, you probably are.
Yeah.
You know?
Like you definitely are.
Yeah.
You know? Although there probably are a few exceptions.
I'll never be 6'8", but you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's just realism, you know.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
On that note, I want to take a pee break.
Yeah. I think from what I've noticed that people are usually impressed with what they can't do. So if you like, I love like watercolor paintings because I have never tried it. I'm just not good at it. You know what I mean? Like, so if you can do any type of watercolor painting, I'm fucking impressed, you know? And it's like, he's a very like, Coda has a very like dark art type style. And I'm like, most people are not going to be able to appreciate that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like sometimes people appreciate too what they like, the opposite too, like what they can understand.
Yes. They're going to score what they can't understand a little higher sometimes.
Like someone could do a really nice portrait and it could like win some competition because it's like, whoa, it looks so real.
Right.
But like you and I both know that like you already have the picture of the portrait. If you're a good technical tattooer, it's like really for me, a portrait is very easy.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because it's just there. You're just doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like when someone like took some risks and like made something like really interesting, they might think it's like weird or like strange or it doesn't make sense. But like as like an artist, I can like see like they took a risk here, or like did something a little like drastic there, or exaggerated this.
Sure.
But like your average Joe was like not so, you know. But, well, I mean that would probably be more talking about like people aren't artists.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can impress someone's grandma with like a portrait.
Right.
But if you made like some really cool, funky piece of art, they might be like a little more like, what is it? You know?
Yeah.
But I think that, but you're saying like the judges like are into art.
Yeah. They're supposed to be.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's very interesting. And I genuinely don't care. The only time I care if somebody likes my art is if it's a client, you know what I mean? Like, outside of them, honestly, don't care.
Yeah.
You know, like your opinion, if you're another good artist, then I'll care.
Yeah.
Not as much as the client, but I'll still care.
Or at least you'll take into consideration because they do understand art or something like that.
Yeah.
You don't like care per se of their ultimate opinion because your client was happy.
Exactly.
But like you could consider their feedback maybe because they understand.
Right.
Yeah. But like at the end of the day, like in the tattoo like service, like you almost would. If your client's happy, right? Then like
I used to kind of do that. Like people would show me a tattoo, and like I'm not good at hiding my facial expressions at all.
Me,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
I'm
so
kind of like that too.
I'm like making these ugly.
I'm kind of hard at hiding my like feelings in general.
Right.
Like if I'm like upset or down, like everyone around knows.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So like people show me their shitty tattoo, and like I remember like I'd get called out a bunch and be like, "Oh, you don't like it?" And I'm like, "That's fucking junk." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and then I would crush them basically, all the way up until that point. They fucking loved it. You know what I mean? And then it's like I stopped doing that, obviously. You know what I mean? Or at least trying to hide it better. But it's hard sometimes. It's like I don't want to crush your dreams, but like that's shit, you know. But ultimately, if they're happy, who fucking cares? You know what I mean? Like most of the time, the people that show me like their tattoos and their junk, they're way more excited about it than the guy that's like got really beautiful work and they're just like, "Oh yeah, here you go," you know, and I got this over here and this, you know. They're just kind of like nonchalant about it. And then you got the guy that got like, you ever notice like the guy in town that's usually the busiest is like the worst tattoo artist, but they're so good at the experience.
Yeah.
that's what matters. You know what I mean? Like the art will matter for us, but like, and even that, I still question sometimes, like, I do now, but I didn't for the last, probably up until 2 years ago. So the last 20 years, I did not like my art. And I just wouldn't post things, or I wouldn't, whatever. And I used to believe that like art was for like other people to enjoy, not necessarily for you to enjoy.
Yeah.
Because we're very critical. Artists is our worst critic and everything like that. But that's fine. It's whatever. And now that like I'm starting to become more at peace, and I genuinely don't care if people like my artwork, and I'm just enjoying doing it. And that to me is everything. You know what I mean? And in my opinion, it does turn out better. In my opinion, you know what I mean? And mine's the only one that matters. Yeah. So I went from like the opposite of it, where like I hated everything, and I was always like, my opinion doesn't matter. It's just the masses, basically. As long as everybody else likes it, it's good, And now I'm the opposite. I'm like, as long as I like it and I enjoy doing it, and it's not even that if I liked it, but more that I enjoyed doing it. Some of my favorite photographs are not good photographs, but I tried so fucking hard to get it. You
enjoyed like where you were mentally, or what you were trying to do. Or
just the pursuit of it.
Maybe even like the smell of the air.
Yeah, something. And it meant something to me. And I was crushing people that like, they had such a good experience, and maybe they did respect me and they liked my artwork, and I'm sitting here saying it's shit, and I'm just crushing them. And now they hate their tattoo. And it's like, well, I shouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? So I should have been more supportive, or, and I think for a lot of clients, I think the experience is worth more. For some artists, like it's definitely, the end result, the artwork. But
I think that's when someone's like super niche.
Yeah.
And like you're collecting like their thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, like a Moscow or something. Sure. Like maybe the experience is like less.
Yeah.
Because it's like that's what he does. And I don't not saying he doesn't give people a good experience, but like just someone like that kind of has like a thing.
Right.
That's like so notable.
Right.
That maybe someone is going there just to like collect that on their body. More.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe.
I do the same thing, but at the same time, like I buy paintings from people that I enjoy them as people. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, you can dub this out if you want, but Casey Baugh is a fucking douchebag. You know what I mean? And
I don't even know who that is.
He's a very famous painter.
I'm not gonna dub it out.
Oh yeah, don't bother. He's a douchebag. And most of the painting world.
I'm the kind of guy that if I like you and you tell me someone's a douchebag, then I think they're a douchebag.
This guy's definitely a douchebag. Okay.
That's how I am.
Yeah.
Like if I'm friends with someone and they don't like someone, I don't either.
Right. and I know people, and I'm like that too. So I do try to be a little careful on like my opinions on that kind of stuff. But this guy is genuinely a douchebag. And he's known for it. He rips people off constantly. And I had an opportunity to buy one of his paintings for like $600, and I could probably could have sold it for tens of thousands, and not only did I not buy the painting, I left his workshop early. I've never done that.
Yeah.
And because he was such a fucking douchebag, and I didn't believe everybody. I always heard that he was, that kind of guy and that stuff. And then I showed up to his workshop and it was dead on. It was just a terrible, terrible experience. So it taught me that like the experience does matter at the same time. You know what I mean? And you can be the best artist, and if you're a dick, you're a dick. You know what I mean? And people just, but there will be people out there that just don't care. I mean, he's still making his money. He still makes a living. Yeah. But there's just people like that, and I think you have to figure out like what they're into. And that's one thing that I like to do is ask my client, like, why did you come to me? And a lot of times they'll say, oh, I like the detail, or I like that you draw it on freehand, or I like this or whatever. And I just make sure that that is the most important element. You know what I mean? So like, if they don't want me to draw something on freehand, I won't. You know what I mean? Like, it hurts me. And that's part of the like, because it's commissioned. That's why I don't like it. You know what I mean? But I have to respect it because it is commissioned. So I have to give that person what they want, or I like the detail. Or
make them feel like comfortable in how you do it or whatever.
Right. Or sometimes they'll just be like, I don't care. I want anything. So they want the experience. You know what I mean? They want my artwork but they really want the experience. They that's what they've heard. That's what they're after. They're going through some change in their life or something.
Yeah, no, I know, because I've had like bad days or times in my life where I felt like I did a pretty cool tattoo, but I wasn't in like the right mind frame to give a good experience. And
Right.
like, maybe the client didn't even come back or something. But not that I was ever like going out of my way to not be.
Right.
But I might have just been like neutral.
Sure. Yeah.
But like deviated
But
from
they
like,
wanted that high,
yeah,
high
yeah, because
experience.
I've had that happen. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, whatever happened to that person? The tattoo was coming out so cool.
Yeah.
Nothing was wrong.
Right.
I just didn't talk because
Yeah.
I just like was, I don't know, going through something, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was getting like divorced or something. You know what I mean? I just had like an off day.
Yep.
But I wasn't, I think that for me, it's like hard to even like 0 would be my neutral.
Sure.
I can't go like be it past that, but like
Right.
my not nice is just nothing.
Right. Yeah. It's
But
just
like, yeah.
nice a lot. Yeah.
But it's like very different from like my typical mode of operation, which would be like
you know,
giving
very
the
high.
experience. Yeah. Or like enthusiastic,
Sure.
which is like how I felt like I built a lot of my career, like being hyped, like, oh, this is going to be sick. Like, you know,
Right. Yeah.
but like sometimes if I'm not in that mood, I felt like I gave someone like not a good experience, but
Sure.
it's not that I gave them a bad experience.
Right. It's just not what they went for.
Yeah.
You know.
It's like almost like going to a restaurant and your servers just brings you your food.
Right.
It
Yeah.
says enjoy, like, you know, and
Yeah.
then comes back or you need anything else, and then just ask, you get the check.
Yeah.
Like that might have been my worst day.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But it's
Yeah.
not like it's not like I said, never went out of my way to not be like, I wasn't mean or not nice.
Sure.
And then maybe they wouldn't come back, and it could be for other, you know, it could be like their own financial, you know, whatever. But
Sure.
sometimes I would think like, fuck, did I not like go the extra mile
Right.
at that moment? Because
Yeah.
So sometimes I think like the experience is almost more important.
Actually, it can be. So I bought a Nissan Titan truck, dope truck, like really nice trucks.
Nice.
I was really shocked at like how good it.
That's what you have now?
No, I have a Ram now. But the experience was so bad buying the truck.
Oh.
It was so bad, and the truck was, even to this day, I've always had trucks. Even to this day, that's by far the best truck I've ever
Yeah,
had.
I got my first truck a few years ago.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if I could not have a truck.
I know, it's so hard.
Yeah.
You could do so much.
Yeah, I go over fucking curbs. And,
Right. Haul
Like,
shit.
yeah. I'm like, how
Dumb
could I
shit
have
like
a
that.
car? It's like,
Right. But the experience was so bad. The guy tried to like guilt me into buying it and try to like make it sound like I basically already bought it, you know, and like I was very clear that I was still looking around. I never even test drove it. I didn't have a quote for my Jeep that I was trading in. I'd never even seen the truck. I test drove a different truck and they were bringing mine in, you know what I mean? And it was supposed to be, and I didn't order it. It was just like, I wanted it black on black, and they were like, oh, we have one coming. You know what I mean? And I was like, cool, let me check that out. And he tried to like basically make me feel obligated into buying it. I didn't sign any papers, no nothing. I didn't even know how much the truck was, because all of them have like slightly different options, you know. And I shit you not, he told me, he was like, man, that's like somebody coming in and getting a tattoo and not paying for it. I'm like, that would be like if I did the tattoo and them not paying for it, I could see like there'd be some hostility. I have not signed anything.
Yeah.
And I told you that I wasn't going to get it today. I was going to come back tomorrow because I was deciding between that and a car. And so he like tried to guilt me into it. I did need the truck business wise. You know,
Right.
I got a lot of pigment to haul, obviously.
We were playing the game with the guy too at the dealer.
I was not.
No?
No, I'm terrible buying cars.
Yeah.
I'll pay sticker price.
Me
and I
too.
don't give any argument.
I do the same
I'm
thing.
fucking horrible.
I even
at
paid
it.
over MSRP on my one of my cars.
Oh, for sure.
Because I just wanted it and there was only one around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at
I'd
it.
rather just get out of there.
Right.
They're like manipulative and crazy.
Yep. And everything they say is bullshit.
Yeah.
You know? And the guy gave me such a bad experience that I sold the truck within a year. And it was the best truck I ever had.
Because you couldn't deal with like the associated experience.
Yeah, I hated it right off the bat. And I could not name one thing that was wrong with it. It was such an awesome truck. And I was like, I have to get rid of this. It started bad. It's been bad. You know, like
You just had a bad taste in your mouth about
Yep.
the truck.
100%. That guy just died. I just found that out.
Oh,
So
maybe karma got him.
I don't know. It's not really enough for me to be like, haha. But
Yeah.
I kind of did.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a dick inside, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you almost gotta be. Really.
Right.
Yeah.
But it did.
I always said it to people, I'm a nice dick.
I'm a nice dick. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. But it ruined it for me. And no matter how good the truck was, I was not going to drive it. Period. So I think the experience does, like, sometimes I think it does trump the quality.
Yeah.
You know? We go into it and we're like, well, I'm in a shitty mood, but I'm going to give you, like, the tattoo that you deserve. You know what I mean? And I'm in a shitty mood, so I'm just going to put on my headphones and I'm going to do my thing. But I promise you, like, I'm going to be very professional about this, and I'm not going to let my mood affect your tattoo. Sure. And sometimes, in most of the cases, if you are a true professional, that's absolutely the case. However, you took out the experience part.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then that person won't come back.
Yeah.
And that's just the cold, hard truth of it. You know?
Yeah, and I think that happens with me too, because I, like, have this podcast and, like, some YouTube videos, and, like,
right.
so people, like, look me up. I did a couple of those, like, inked things. When you look me up on Google, they come up right away, and I'm being funny and goofing around. Then I come in and I'm, like, a serious mood.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they might not get that, like, chatty Cathy, like, kind of funny guy that they, like, were expecting.
Yeah.
It could happen to me. Because, like, as much as I could be that guy, I could also be, like, the opposite guy.
Sure.
But that's just because I'm, like, a very, like, peak and valley kind of guy.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very emotional.
So, yeah, like, same. Yeah.
My highs are very highs, and my lows are very low.
Yeah, precisely same. Yeah.
Yeah, I have an issue with moderation.
Yeah, same.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's what being an artist is. Like, a lot of us are eccentric, or we're very, like, you know, on the extreme,
or layman's terms, just like crazy people.
Yeah, pretty much, in a very, you know, a functional crazy.
Yeah. We're not exactly getting put away in a home,
right?
But we got it.
Could.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. Yeah,
right. If I speak my true mind, I might.
Yeah. But I think that's true. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, that's who the artists always were, right? Like,
right.
We're like the jesters or some shit. Like, they're like, you know.
And I've definitely learned to embrace more of that. I'm weird and quirky anyways, and I like things that, like, people would not expect. You know what I mean? The type of music I listen to, and, like, you know, my interest and stuff like that. They're just like, what the fuck?
What kind of music do you listen
to? Symphonic and, like, instrumental.
Okay.
Mainly.
Nice.
So, I mean, but you wouldn't expect that.
I like a lot of instrumental music.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the same genre, but I like explosions in the sky.
Okay, yeah.
If these trees could talk.
Sure.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. I like Ludovico Nati and, like, Kenny G and Lindsey Sterling, and just, like, people that are very good at instruments or very good at singing. They don't have to have a song.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't care about the words of it. I care very much about, like, their voice. And
I like electronic music. People like that.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like I like electronic music.
Right.
So.
But yeah, we're fucking weird. And
yeah.
I've definitely started to, like, embrace that. There's one guy that he hit me up. We were talking about flow, and the flow was like, so I spent a year in each category of the fundamentals, basically. You know, my first year I did values, and I really studied the shit out of values, and all I cared about was values. Then I did light and shadow and edge control and form and all that kind of stuff, right? So then you go through all the fundamentals, and then you can go way more into depth. And, you know, I went through composition with David Chaffetz. I really loved composition, and I was like, okay, but I'm missing something still. So then I got into flow. And I saved all these, you know, paintings and all these different things on Instagram in this folder called Flow. So this one guy hit me up. He's wanting a sponsorship. And I'm like, hey, man, you still got a long way to go. Let's bring you through some of the levels first before you, like, really come at me. Make it to where I can't deny you. You know what I mean? And he's like, all right, cool. What should I work on? I'm like, oh, I think your light and shadow is good. I think this is good. You know, I would say composition is okay, but you can go into that more, and you could go into this more. Which would you like? He's like, composition. I was like, okay, let's work on flow. That was one of my favorite things I ever did. And I spent like almost 2 years in flow instead of just one, because I loved it so much. And that moment on that I started flow, every painting or tattoo you saw incorporated, you know, flow into it. But he asked me, like, can I see your folder that you were talking about, you know? And I was like, oh, sure. So I sent it to him. And I got all these weird things in there that I didn't even think I saved. I just, whatever. But it has like figure skating, which I fucking love figure skating.
Figure skating is pretty cool.
It is dope.
Every time I see it on like the Winter Olympics or something, I like realize how much I like it.
Yeah, I love it. I'm like very obsessed with it.
You like go out of your way to watch it like on the regular?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty dope.
Every day.
Yeah.
And I had like, just different things like that. And he's like, is this the right folder? And I'm like, oh yeah. And I was like, that's because I don't like figure skate, but I ice skate and I rollerblade and everything like
same.
that.
I played hockey my whole life.
Hockey, yeah.
Yeah.
So like I'm very good on the skates, and
same.
You can learn a lot about flow with that, and how you turn and how you're cutting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When you're gonna cut, what degree you're gonna cut at. And there's kind of a science to it, almost like mathematical in a sense.
Yeah. Because there's only like a possible flow at like a certain speed that would even be obtainable without like falling.
Yeah, or throwing yourself forward or falling backwards or something like that.
Right.
Absolutely.
There's like a law to it, like a physics.
Yeah, sure. So I told him, I was like, if you want to learn flow, pick up a skateboard or a bike or some skates or something. Yeah. And start turning and see how it turns. And you turn too quick, man, you're gonna throw yourself. You know what I mean? It's the same in flow in art. If you're turning too quick or too wide or whatever, it's just not fluent. So if you look up certain people like just really beautiful figure skaters or something like that, and they go through a big jump, a triple axel or something, and when they land, they have this like and you can hear it. It's like a very distinct sound. And it's a very distinct angle that they're hitting it at. That's flow. And they're flowing from one move to the next very fluently. And that's in all kinds of different things. That's figure skating and that kind of stuff is just something that I'm interested in, but it's very obvious flow. So that's what I try to like help them with, is like, it doesn't matter what you're looking at. You will see flow in it. Once you start understanding flow and you start studying it and stuff, you're just going to see it everywhere. Yeah. You start understanding like rules of thirds, and you're going to start standing in areas that like is visually better from a rule of third perspective, you know what I mean, or whatever it is. So once you study this kind of stuff, it's almost ingrained into you at that point, you know what I mean. I always have a camera every time.
Yeah, you rolled up with a camera on.
Yeah,
I don't know if I've ever seen you without a camera.
Never. Yeah, never. If I go out to eat, alone, I always have a camera 100% of the time. And I'm always trying to stand where it's most visually appealing. So like puzzle pieces, and I'll sit there and I'll stand there and I'll be looking in that direction. And I know that if somebody walked into that space, they would fit like a puzzle. And then I could just take the picture if I wanted to, or I could just stand here. But I always find myself standing in like very interesting perspective spots. You know what I mean? Almost awkwardly, if someone's like in the spot that like I would find most visually appealing, I will actually stand like right next to them until they get uncomfortable and move a little bit. Yeah. And that's
just to observe the room even.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, I always want, because I like visual things. You know what I mean? So I want the best visual spot.
Yeah. But it's interesting because there's like, I guess the best visual spot for you though might be different.
Oh yeah,
for somebody else.
Yeah,
because I notice even like when I take photos of somebody or like line things up, I have like a way of.
Sure.
But it's weird because I feel like there's a flow that exists, but then there's like flows within the flows.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
100%.
It's almost like a fractal.
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean.
Yep.
Sometimes I like a flow that's clunky, but really it's still on the flow.
Sure. But it's slightly a little bit off. Yeah. I love that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's little kicks. I love those.
And I think I see things very like I guess I like things from like more of like a tech, not like an organic flow.
Sure.
But I always do, like in my mind, call it like more of like a tech flow.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like almost like a circuit board or like, like.
Yeah, but that's your flow. That's
yeah. So, but it's still on the flow.
Sure, absolutely.
And
you're just looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, you could like almost like look at things like
yeah. I'm constantly framing things in my head.
Yeah,
always.
You know what I do? I look at things and I think about the color that they are.
Yeah.
and then what makes that color.
Sure.
I feel like I have like a superpower, like in the sense that I could look at something and know what I need to mix to make it.
Okay.
And I could make anything. Like if you gave me a piece of paper with a color on it, I could make it.
Sure.
Quick.
Yeah.
And I don't even know why, how, or anything. I just do.
You have a very good understanding of color.
Yeah, but I don't. But I do.
Well, you do.
Yeah,
You're
but
just
I don't.
not speaking the language. That's
We talked about this before. Yeah.
Like,
I just, because I understand like what white will do to it and what a little yellow will do to it and like put green. But you could also make the same color in like a few ways, I feel, too. Sometimes I have a dirty tattoo needle, like not dirty, but like with ink in it already.
Right.
And I could just make the next color without even rinsing it because it's like, I'm going to compensate a little more of this to like neutralize that before just to save myself from dipping, you know, like cleaning it. Like,
yeah, because you have a good understanding of color.
I guess so.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it is like as you educate yourself, whether it's through experience, observation, or, you know, book knowledge or something like that, you're going to hit the target more often, you know.
And then even furthermore than that, sometimes it's like I'm using a photo reference and it's like I'm going to make this color and it's like I know it's a little off, but like my reference is imaginary.
Yeah.
I made it in ZBrush, like the value is right and it's still in the right temperature. I don't even give a fuck if it's exact.
Right. Yep.
And I think that comes into like the confidence we were talking about before, like just like who cares? It's like a salmon-y like pink, but it's like a little more red than like I wanted it to be, but like doesn't matter, the value's right anyway, like you know what I mean. So it's just like I'm just gonna do it. And
ultimately that's the idea, is that like you get so good at something that you can pick and choose, you know, what you want to do, what rules you want to follow, if you want to tweak or manipulate or twist or whatever you want to do,
right?
You know?
I actually, it's like one of the first things I remember, like I think Dimitri Vision, the artist, said it like years ago. If the light is right, everything's all right. Like it's something I always repeat in my head, like when I'm tattooing, you know?
Yeah.
It's funny too, because I could like see a tattoo artist or a painter or someone like do something and I didn't make this up. I heard someone else say it, but you could tell if they understand what they're doing versus just copying it.
Yes.
It's so obvious.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, they're going to miss a lot of things if they're just copying it.
Yeah, because it's like if you understand that like an eyeball is a sphere like embedded like in there, like you know that like you're doing like that's like a sphere, and then if you know how a sphere works, you can light it. But then it's like if you know how a sphere works, you could almost like round it more better. That's like what I try to do like in tattoos, like not just exaggerating maybe the contrast, the chroma, the color, but it's like also exaggerating like how that shape would work.
Sure.
If it's like round, I could make it even like more round.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and then that like brings that forward even more.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
and that's the exciting part is like, as you move through those levels and then you go deeper into those levels and deeper into the levels of those levels, that's when you get the real freedom to like be able to manipulate things to your desire, you know, to your style. You know?
Like even the other day I was like tattooing like a statue and like the back of the neck had like a mid-tone where it like rounded back, but there was like black in the top left, and I was like, well, that's a mid-tone, it's rounding off. I actually just made it like black rolling off because it's just like it technically wouldn't have been, but it's like balanced it and it still makes it look curved, and I was just like, why not just take it a step further to then like balance that, like taking those liberties. I guess.
And you can do that if so, like I always say, you know, or they always say like you have an artistic license. Yeah. Right. I think you have to buy your artistic license, you know, so the buying it is like understanding the repercussions of something, you know, so if you're going to, you know, raise the contrast, there's going to be things that are going to happen from that. You're going to lose your halftones and your midtones and stuff like that. The reflective light is going to be a little bit darker, you know what I mean? Or whatever it is. Whatever you're doing is going to have a repercussion. It's going to not necessarily a repercussion, but like every action has a reaction. So it's going to have a reaction. And when people start like, let's say if you're designing a sleeve, I see this a lot where they'll have like contradicting light sources, right? So they got this portrait up here and it's lit from the top left. And then they got a portrait down here that's lit from the top right. That is going to manipulate the image as a whole. You know what I mean? So like now you have conflicting light sources. Your brain is very smart, and you're going to know that that's off. You might not know why it's off, but you're going to know it's off.
Yeah.
Something is off. And when it comes to realism, so you remember those hyper realistic eyes I used to paint all the time? I fucking hate those things. Because it's literally over rendering. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's
that's a thing that I had to learn too. Over rendering is a thing.
Is an absolute.
Yeah, it's like almost like a horrible thing.
Right. But people, if I show you the painting that I gave you, and then I show people those realistic eyes, that painting was way harder. The realistic,
it's harder to under render. Like it's harder to like not over render something.
And simplify it and loose and play with it and manipulate it, you know, and it's surrealism. It's not realism.
Yeah.
So I remember my dad came to my studio one time. He's like, why do you have all these pictures of eyes everywhere? And I was like, oh, those are paintings. I painted those. He's like, so you took a picture of someone's eye and then you painted it exactly how it was. I'm like, literally pore for pore. You know what I mean? Like, it's eyelash for eyelash. It is perfect. It is an exact replica. He's like, why didn't you just print it?
Yeah.
I was like, fuck.
Sean Foy told me that one time years ago.
Yeah.
When I was learning.
Yeah.
I remember him saying that.
Yeah. It sucks because like you put all the effort. I put 20 hours, 30 hours into that painting. And my dad's like, you could have printed it out in like 6 minutes, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it would have been done, you know?
Yeah.
And it completely changed the trajectory.
Yeah.
The trajectory.
That's a cool thing. I actually like that. I always felt that way.
Yeah.
Like someone just like a super hyper realistic tattoo.
Right.
I used to feel that way. It's like, well, it's just, I mean, I guess that's different though, because someone just like wants it on their body.
Sure. Yeah.
But like, yeah, at the same time, like that's why I would like at least like fuck with the chroma or like the something or like add a surrealness something. Or like a lot of times I'll put highlights like exaggerated or like, you know, just so
that artistic license.
It feels like like an artistic license.
Yeah. But you got to buy it. You got to pay for that license. Yeah. And so I'm glad that like Kit taught me how to do hyper realism, and I'm very glad that I went away from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm glad that
that was you buying the license.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that I can twist and manipulate and do whatever I want later, and I can do something like what I gave you, which is, in my opinion, way harder. And I'm not going to impress as many people with that kind of painting. The eye, and I do this at conventions. I'll bring one of my eye paintings, and then I'll bring like that blue stag I did or something. The blue stag was way harder, and in my opinion, a way better painting than those hyper realistic eyes. And the eye will always get all the attention.
Right.
And it's just a bunch of idiots standing around like, holy shit, you know, that's amazing and all this. And it's like, that's not shit. I did that with almost no art knowledge. You know what I mean? And like, it is low level. You know what I mean? So like to be able to twist and manipulate reality in a very visually correct way where it still makes sense, to me, that's way harder.
Yeah.
So I like artists like Zhao Ming Wu and stuff like people like that are like, they're taking realism and they're pushing limits. Not, you know, they can push it as far as they want, but it's not exactly what you saw in the photograph or something. That's with my son, man. That was such bullshit. They didn't use a reference, so he got docked points because he didn't use a photo reference. That's way harder to create something out of your head with correct lighting. He thought the lighting through, he thought the composition through, he thought his edge control, everything through. And this guy the guy that won did a fucking overexposed bullshit monochromatic painting. You know what I mean? From a photograph. Yeah. And it was like, what was the difference? The photograph looked better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel that way too. Even when I tattoo like a flower or something, like I don't stencil the veins anymore. Like why? Yeah. I know how they work.
Sure.
And then I know how the light hits the like each vein.
Right.
So then I could just make them and then get fun with it, or
because of an artistic license.
Or like if there's like an edge or something, like a tip of a flower that rolls away and it's actually like light, I might even just make the tip of that dark.
Sure.
So I can make the background bright, like just like stagger contrast and stuff. And it's not like real, but I understood the rule.
Right.
You know what I mean? So then it's like, like little things like that.
Then you can change. And I think that's what they didn't understand about my son's painting, is that like he legitimately has been raised around a bunch of famous artists all the time. He draws constantly, and he did that painting in like a couple of hours. You know what I mean? So if he would have done it correctly and like had more time, like he should have, it would have came out way better. But the fact that they said like, oh, you know, you didn't use a photo reference, it's like, he doesn't need it. You know, he's past that low level shit. You know what I mean? Like, so that's why I'm trying to draw my tattoos on now. It's scary to draw it on. You know what I mean? It's a massive risk to not use a stencil, but it's just low level. You know what I mean? And I want to get past that level.
I remember I had that that lesson. I was tattooing at Love Machine, and I remember I used to put a layer on my iPad of the stencil,
right? And
I would toggle it on and off.
Yeah.
And I remember Sivak came over and said, "Man, why do you do that?
Yeah.
Like create." Yeah. And I was like, "It's true. Like I already got the landmarks of my tattoo. Like why?"
Yeah.
You
it
know
just
what I
makes
mean?
you more of a slave and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like even that like Joe Rogan painting I did over there with like his beard and stuff. Like I actually took my paper and started going,
yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And I was like, and like when you step away, it looks great. But when you get up close, it's just like nuts.
Right.
I remember specifically, I was like going like this. I was like,
right.
I had a friend here and I go, look, like just like.
Yeah. Creating effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's more fun anyway.
It's more fun and it's more true to you.
Yeah.
So like if I'm following a photo reference and I'm doing a beard, right? I will follow I will follow his beard. If I'd have taken that picture 2 seconds later, that beard would have been a little different. You know what I mean? But I didn't. I took it at that moment. So why do I have to follow every strand exactly when one gust of wind would have changed all of that? You know what I mean? So like, why not just make the effect of hair and it just falls how it does? And you can do it with reason and you can do it with intent and everything like that. But like, why do I have to follow every single strand? You know, I'm better than that. I should be able to be better than that. Low in my career, of course, you know what I mean? Like, follow it exactly as you can. I think the hard thing about tattooing is that like, if you're trying to learn values and that's something that you need to work on, and all of your clients come in and they all want tribal, you're not going to be able to study values. You know what I mean? Like you're a slave to the customer at that point. You know what I mean? So like, that's where I think like choosing another medium such as painting or photography or, you know, whatever it is, ink, you know, illustration, something, charcoal, I don't care, something to be able to practice what you want to get better at and study and actually study. You know, I think that's where you make like the big jumps.
Yeah, absolutely. And just experience too. Like, but you're right. If you're doing like a one track thing, it's going to be hard to learn. But like, even just from my experience of like tattooing, like, you know, I had like Mela in here and she was like, how I did that so efficiently. And I was like, it's just also like, you know, 11 years of doing things like, so like that I made a bunch of mistakes so many times or didn't do something efficiently that like at this point it's like, you know, riding a bike, like, you know, just. And then I talked about that with somebody else on this podcast too, that like you spend so many years focusing on like technical things and maybe there's more specifically to tattooing, probably would be painting too. But after you get the outcome you kind of want, but it might have been like a backdoor way or like a roundabout way of doing it. And then you get there, then it's like you start, then the next thing to focus on is like, how can I get there easier? Right. Is that kind of like, I guess, like
absolutely 100%.
What you're saying? Like you can't learn efficiency until you learn.
You got to learn the path and then you can get more efficient.
I think that's like buying your license though, in a way too, right? Like in a way, because it's like how could you be creative if you first can't like do it?
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just exploring and just observing, you know, there's exploring and observing are two words that I've really like started to pay attention a little bit more to in art. You know what I mean? Where I don't think we observe enough, you know what I mean? And like actually observe, like take a step back and look at or watch it happen, you know? So when I teach people how to paint or tattoo or whatever, even tattooing is just making a mark. You can't say that that's wrong. You know what I mean? It might not be the right mark for that area at that time, but you made a mark. You know what I mean? So like you could utilize that as a tool and you can utilize that. You just used it in the wrong area.
Right.
So like, but texture, man, like I've been exploring with texture and tattooing, and I'm moving my machine in all kinds of weird ass ways, and I'm trying different things, and I'm just whatever I can do, just like randomness almost, and like sporadic, and whatever.
Yeah.
But it's coming out as a texture, and it's like, okay, maybe that wasn't the right texture for that, but that would look cool in grass. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It was supposed to be water, but fucking turned out like looking grass. Well, I'll just do that technique in grass next. You know what I mean? So it wasn't wrong. It was just the wrong time.
Yeah. And then there's like the technical side of like texture. Like I used to do each individual texture,
right?
Like with a little thing, or it's like, do you do like a base and then go over it?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's like that. There's like always that battle for texture.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
But they're just effects.
Yeah.
And that's what painting is. I do a painting class, and like I tell people, like, just explore. Explore and observe it. So if I put a paper towel on it and I smush it in and I kind of pull it off, what does it do? Oh, it kind of looks like an onion, or it kind of looks like a tree or something like that.
Yeah.
That's an effect.
Yeah.
So like pay attention to the effects and what happens, and then put that in there. Like, okay, I'm going to pull up my kneaded eraser and I'm going to like slide it, and then I'm going to like, pick it or something.
Yeah.
What happens then? Well, I get this, like, it tapers off into nothing, so it looks like it's turning form. Cool. I'll use that.
Yeah.
It's just effects.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And then maybe you could and then over time you're going to combine those effects
and put them in the right places. That's where the experience comes in.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, especially in the beginning, explore and observe.
Yeah.
That's like a big thing for me.
And that's another thing too. Like I learned with like textures and stuff, like you can like, same with like, I guess it would be like over rendering, like over texture or something.
Oh yeah. I do that right now.
Yeah.
I do the extreme of everything. So if I'm focusing on texture, I put way too much texture.
Yeah.
And then as I get experience, I learn to dial it back.
Yeah.
I do that in almost every scenario. Bless you.
Central Texas allergies.
Right.
No, but yeah, it's same thing. I've learned that with like blurring.
Yep.
Like I might have a picture that's completely in focus, but like I know like the part you want to pay attention is like on the left side of the skull, and like the back edge I'll just blur.
Yeah.
But that's because I've like observed enough things that were like that I could start adding that to something that's not there.
Yep.
Or it's like the whole thing's textured. I might as well just texture what's in the light.
Right.
Why even bother texturing the stuff that's in the dark? Because then it makes that less texture more effective.
Right.
By not like texturing at all.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like that and that's hard to do at first.
Yeah.
And
you have to learn that like you can't have smooth without texture.
Right.
You know what I mean? So not only do you got to learn texture, but if you want to amplify it, you got to learn smooth too.
Yeah. I had this conversation with someone one time when I was really high, and I kept relating everything in life to the yin yang sign.
Yeah.
And like whatever we would talk about, I just kept saying it's like the yin and the yang.
It is.
And it was like this funny thing, but like I feel like me with a tattoo, like I try to balance color with texture and smooth with composite, like just everything. You just like if you do one thing here, there's like it's like a cause and an effect.
Yeah.
So it's like when you do one thing, you do the other.
Yeah.
Hard line, like blur, like texture, smooth, like purple, a little yellow, like.
Yeah. And that's how I teach, is literally by saying cause and effect.
Yeah. Oh, is that right?
Yeah. 100%. That's like I'll write it on the board and I'll tell them like cause and effect. If I do this, it's going to do this.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
So now as an educated artist, I have to put that in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
That's the difference,
Right.
But it's all cause and effect. And in tattooing, it's a little bit harder because we do have like different skin types, different areas of the body are different, you know what I mean? So like it's not a universal thing as much as like if I always use the same canvas, the same paint, the same brushes, you know what I mean, or whatever. In tattooing, it's not as consistent, so it makes it a little bit harder that way.
Yeah, for
quite
sure.
a bit harder,
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. If
Yeah,
you don't mind.
sure.
So you've talked about superpowers twice, okay? And I got a thing where I ask everybody 2 questions, and you kind of fucked it up for me already. So that sucks. Thanks. But
that's my superpower now.
Yeah, maybe. So I always start off by asking somebody, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Yeah.
So what would yours be?
I think invisibility.
Okay, creep. I got you.
What do you say? Creep?
Creep. Yeah, you're good. Keep going.
Wait, what was the next question?
Just why would you want invisibility? What would that give you?
Access to anywhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Then my follow-up question is, what is your superpower? And usually people are like very taken back from that because they don't think about it. They always think about what they want. They don't necessarily think about what they have. So
I think my superpower is more intuitive.
okay.
Like I can always like feel things intuitively.
Sure.
If that would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it's able to understand systems around me.
Okay.
Like I don't watch a movie. I watch how they filmed the movie, how they lit the movie.
Okay.
The writer.
Sure.
I get empathetic towards like the feelings of like how that writer, not even the actor acting it, the guy writing it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So, and then I start understanding like, oh, like they created this like juxtaposition or thing to like bait your emotions this way. Or when I go to a restaurant, I'm like observing how they like the busboy, like I'm always paying attention to like how it works.
Sure. Okay.
More than sometimes being present for the experience.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So I think that's my, like, I could break down how something works. Like I could almost reverse engineer something like on the spot.
Okay.
And then tell you like how they did that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
cool.
that's like and I think that's how I figure out a lot of like art stuff, if that makes sense.
You're
like,
dissecting everything.
Dissecting. And
Yeah.
it could be like some people view it as a negative thing that you're around, you know, I've noticed.
Yeah, I guess I would view it more as like you want the understanding.
Yeah.
You know?
I want to understand how everything works.
Right.
I don't want to just go to a Broadway play. I'm looking about how they put this production on.
Sure.
From the promotion to the seating arrangement to the like
the anatomy of it,
the
and everything.
acoustics, like
Yeah.
the how the stage was lit, like, which I guess is good because that's basically essentially saying that you would be a back end type of person, part of the production. You know what I mean? Like someone has to think of that, you know?
Right.
Or the marketing. I always like try to understand that.
Okay.
So yeah,
that's cool. That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's like my favorite question. I ask everybody that almost always upon meeting them, and I probably developed that after I met you, or else I would have asked you right off the bat. Mm-hmm. But I'm notorious for that question because you can learn a ton about somebody. You can learn their desires, and I like to dissect it too, and I like to playfully like, you know, go into it a little bit further in my mind and like, why do they want this superpower? Why do they think that this is their superpower and stuff like that? And I think we have many superpowers, and it's just playing on your strengths and your weaknesses. You know?
And I guess the invisibility one, it was more like, I guess I didn't like think of that one too much, but I don't know. I just like the idea that I could be somewhere and not be seen.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. You'd like street photography then.
Yeah, like just the ability to like go be a fly on a wall somewhere, or you know what I mean, like.
That's my favorite part about street photography.
Yeah,
because when I have my camera in my hand, I do not exist to the world.
Yeah,
people are constantly bumping into me. Like for some odd reason, I can very easily disappear. I'm not conscious of what I look like or anything. Like I feel like I'm just an observer. And nobody even knows I'm there, and I can just take pictures.
And I think that's why I would prefer that one. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I could go hang out in the green room at the comedy club, or you know, like whatever, like something like that, and just because I have like a fascination too, like whenever there's like extraordinary people, like you know, famous musicians, like or anyone who's done anything. I've probably went down the YouTube rabbit hole of every one of their interviews.
Right. Yeah.
Like I just want to know how their mind works.
Sure.
You know. I also like ask a lot of people questions. Mm-hmm. Like I'm very hard to lie to.
Right.
And some people take it wrong. Like, you know, like I've like dated people and stuff, and they feel like you're like grilling them, but I'm not. I just
Curiosity.
I'm so curious. I ask 100 questions.
Yeah.
And if I feel like someone has like inconsistencies in their responses and stuff, like I know like something like psychologically is not accurate.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Or you want to find out why, because sometimes there will be some
100%.
differences, and you're like,
yeah.
Well, but you said this before. What would be the difference now? Well, because of this. You know what I mean? Like,
or that's when I'll get like almost like in a psychological reverse engineering and be like, okay, this, this kid had to lie to their parents because they're from a strict household, so they developed these tendencies, and they've yet to shed those like egoic defenses in adulthood. Right. So I'll start like empathizing with why they're that way.
Right.
I still might want to keep my distance because at the end of the day, they still are that way.
Yeah.
But like I'll like start to like deduce potentially why.
Sure.
So I can like sometimes hang out with someone and like ask enough questions to kind of get like a deduction of like their past, maybe.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Like,
yeah. Absolutely.
Or what they might have. Not that I know what they've been through, but at least from what they reveal.
Right.
Like that.
Are you into body language at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even if I'm not, I think it's so like I'm keen to it. I'm receptive to it.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I love body language. I love because people do lie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, sometimes it's like unintentional.
Well, unconscious.
Yeah.
Unconscious. It's actually like conscious lying is even more scary.
Yeah.
Unconscious lying is a lot of times because somebody's just afraid.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they have like a low self-esteem and they want acceptance or whatever. So
right.
It's like, and then that's where I can like empathize.
Right.
It's still dangerous.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Well, I remember there was this one guy, and he was a cool guy. He was actually really nice. Clearly a pathological liar. Like,
right.
For sure, pathological liar. And I remember this coworker of mine was like, "Oh man, I hate that guy. He's a fucking pathological liar." I'm like, I don't mind him. I'm like, he lies a lot. I'm like, everything he says is a lie, but it's actually more entertaining. If I ask him how his day was, he'd probably be like, "Oh, I just went to work," and in reality, probably nothing happened.
Yeah.
But he's going to give me this grand story, and it's a little bit more entertaining. The difference is, I know he's lying. You know what I mean? I don't like being in a position where, they're trying to actually fool me. Of course they're trying to fool me, but like, I don't want to be fooled. You know what I mean? So if I know that they're a pathological liar and I can accept that, then I'm not going to fall for it. I'm definitely not going to rely on that person. Like, hey, can you pick me up from the airport? Blah, blah, blah. And then I'm sitting there fucking nothing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
or whatever. But
you put them where they belong.
Right. But they're still there.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
but you keep them like in relation to you. Like you said, you're not going to like bank on them potentially.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yep. So, and it actually happened to me. I had this guy steal from me. He stole a lot of money. He got into drugs, and like, it was a really bad situation. And I was going to keep him on staff. And my partner at the time was like, "No, absolutely not." I'm like, "But we already know he's a thief. We might have other thieves. We just don't know it. You know what I mean? But at least we know he's a thief, and we could watch him closer, and we can make sure that it's like much harder for him to take it. You know what I mean? But if we replace him, we get rid of him, we have an open booth. We need to bring somebody in. That's completely unimaginable problems that we're going to have with that person. We already know this person.
Right.
We might be hiring another thief and a snake and a drug addict and this, you know what I mean? Where we already know what this guy is. And I lost the battle, obviously. We had to get rid of him regardless. But I was totally willing to keep him. You know what I mean? Just because it was, honestly, at that point, he was the most true and honest person I had on my staff at that point.
Yeah, because it's like you can almost trust him because it's like where he stands. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of that's how I feel about like people from New York and New Jersey, where I'm from. Like they tell you what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Whereas like people from Texas are like, they're like pretending.
Sure.
Or they're like nice, but they're like not. You know what I mean? Like, or like California or something like that. Like I'd rather someone just be blunt with me or like tell me like, I don't like the way you did that. You know what I mean? Like at least I know like what your opinion is.
Right.
Then when you're not telling, it's like someone doesn't know how to communicate. You know, like it's like I'm reading your mind or whatever. Like I'd rather you just tell me like a truth that hurts.
Yeah.
Because at least I know what's up. You know?
And
it's kind of like that,
Yeah. Sometimes I don't, like if I'm talking to my best friend and I want like, you know, I just want her to go along with it. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to bitch about my kids, and then she'll start defending my kids. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Just let me just have this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I already know that.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you know you can trust that person.
Right.
And that's probably why you still go back and it's your best friend.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely one good thing about my wife. She's like brutally honest. And so is my son, Atticus, the small one. So it was kind of funny. Nobody's gonna want to hear this, but I don't care. So he's like going through this evaluation for school so he can like stay in the school and all this stuff. And they had us evaluate him, and they're like, you know, whatever. And I'm like, he's brutally honest. And then he had to fill it out too. And one of the things that he put was like, he's like, I'm a god at math, because he goes to a special math school. He's Asian, so he's really, really good at math. I don't know if I can say that either, but I'm married to an Asian, so fuck it.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, it's a good stereotype. Right?
Yeah.
But he's like, I'm godly at math. And we're talking to the teachers. The one before that was like, you know, I was like, he's brutally honest. The next one is like, I'm godly at math. And I'm like, yeah, you know, he is brutally honest. He thinks he's godly at math. So it's, I don't know. I just found that kind of funny that like some people could just be that honest, you know what I mean? And right or wrong, you know, he's not the smartest kid in the world, but like he's exceptionally good at math. So what's wrong with like feeling that way? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he genuinely thinks he's a god at math.
Yeah.
And like,
well, that's cool.
awesome.
I mean, at least you're like nurturing the reality. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
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 That's cool. I just thought it was funny.
No, it is funny. So what would your superpower be?
I think my superpower is I tend to find myself like in positions that I want to be in for some odd reason, you know? Oh yeah. Especially if I don't qualify.
Yeah.
I always find myself a seat at the table, or I don't believe I have a very good self-belief. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I feel, because I didn't know if that was my superpower, but I always felt like that.
Yeah.
It always just works out.
It just
for me.
Works, yeah.
I'm always where I'm supposed to be at every moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Even if I don't qualify, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sitting there like at dinner tables with, you know, famous artists. I'm not a famous artist, you know what I mean? But like, I'm at the table with them.
But I always felt like that. I know what you mean. I literally know exactly what you mean.
Right.
It's funny because I used to go to a therapist for 10 years. And I remember on day one, the first thing I told her was that.
Yeah.
That I have this belief inside of me that's like meta belief that's like bigger than anything. And I always know that I could do anything if I want. Yeah. Just if I decide. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that was before I was even a tattoo artist. You know 100%. What I mean? And then I got into it and then found my way like up the ranks pretty fast, like hanging out at the table like you're talking about.
Right.
I just know. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. I just never let anything ever stop me.
Yeah. The only thing that I could let stop me is myself, actually.
Yeah. And small thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. But I would say that's probably my main one. I feel like I have a lot just like everybody else. But like that's probably my strongest one. And passion, I think, is probably one of my strongest ones. I'm very, very, very passionate about things. And I think passion wins most of the time. You know, not every time, but I think it really does help a lot.
I also agree. Feel very similar.
Right.
Yeah. I either do it with all passion or I can't do it at all.
Yeah. It's pretty much that. I'm very much an all or nothing person.
Same.
Yeah. My apprentice Max told me one time, he's like, man, you really don't half-ass anything. Like when you fail miserably. You know, when you succeed, you do great.
But failure is so important to succeed.
Yeah.
I think that's why people don't succeed, because when they fail, they don't get back up, right?
Yeah, I have no shame.
It's like mostly failing.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
but like you can do it gracefully. You know what I mean? Like if you take things as lessons, I'm huge on lessons.
Yeah.
Everything is a lesson. I don't like wrestlers don't like excuses. That's our thing, right? And it's because like that person is the same age, the same weight, you know, abiding by the same rules. If they beat you, they did something better. They did something. That was you. You know what I mean? You didn't practice hard enough. You didn't, whatever it was. But that was affected by that. You know what I mean? So that's what I took from wrestling was like, it's 100% on me. I've been called an asshole. I've been called a dick and all this stuff. But the thing I think I get called the most is probably a narcissist. And it's because I have an unbelievable belief that like, this is my world. You know what I mean? It's my world. And,
I mean, it is kind of.
but it's also your world. And when we come together, it's a shared world. And I have to respect certain things to share a world with you. But I genuinely, I don't know if you said it earlier or something, but like, I do believe I'm a God. And I also believe that you're a God and the next person's a God.
I believe that. I've thought about that.
We created life. I know I'm a God. I created life. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like 2 little boys, and they're awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a godly thing to do.
Sure.
And the next person can do the same, and the next person. So I guess I was just raised to like, my mom was very supportive, and she was like, you can literally do anything. You just got to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you got to put in the work, and like, it's got to be your focus. Whatever you're focused on is definitely the direction that you're going to go. So when I'm focused on art, my art is always going up. If I am more focused on business, my business goes up. You know what I mean? If Timeless isn't doing so well, I start focusing on Timeless, it goes up, and Empire goes down. You know what I mean? And like, I have to balance all these things, and I have to make sure that I can juggle that amount of things. You know,
What is that quote? Like, energy goes where attention flows, or something like that.
Yeah. And that's how I build things up. So if I want to do something.
So you're like juggling all these things and putting attention to them and lifting them up.
Right. Yeah.
Simultaneously.
But I have an amazing self-belief that I can do it, just because everything I've done, if I failed, I found the reason why I failed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I just don't do that again.
So you have enough like humility and insight and introspection to like see why you fail, and then what you could adjust or take from it going forward.
Exactly.
Instead of just like failing mindlessly and then just being bitter about it.
Yes. And
yeah.
I have a thing about, I don't know if you've ever heard me say this, but like aimless, I fucking hate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aim small, miss small. So if you're going to do something, aim for something. I don't care what it is, but aim for something and you're going to hit it. If you're just doing something and you're not aiming at it, there's zero progression.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I could sit here and say like, oh, I've been walking all day. You know, I should have been able to walk all over the city, but instead I walked in place. That's not progression.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not anything that happened. I just walked in place. You know what I mean? So that's the way I kind of look at things is if I want to do something, I literally just take a step towards it.
Yeah.
And then I continue each step after that.
And even if you take a step or two back sometimes.
Which usually is the case. I do believe it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes those steps are the greatest leaps.
You
the
gotta
steps
breathe,
back.
You know?
Yeah.
You could exhale for so long, but eventually you gotta like stop, take a breath.
No, that's how I feel like right now. I've been in a little bit of like a lulled state or whatever, you know what I mean? But like I'm almost like looking at it as like an introspective time.
Sure.
To like where like I know in my heart that there's a bigger leap coming.
Right.
You know, I've said this before. Like it's almost like the necessary like coiling. You know, like
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at like grass, so I was thinking about this just a couple weeks ago. I have 6 acres at my house, and about 4 of them I need to light on fire because I need the grass to grow up back stronger. You know what I mean?
So you need to like kill the grass that's there.
So it's destruction that usually takes it. If I mow it a billion times, it'll come back eventually. You know what I mean? But it's going to take a really long time. Sometimes you got to like smash through it. Sometimes you got to light it on fire. Sometimes you got to destroy it to its roots, and then all that like feeds the soil. You know what I mean? In a sense. And that's the way I kind of look at my life is like sometimes like if I'm going to kick something because I'm an all or nothing kind of person, like I got to like kick it hard. You know what I mean?
Like burn it the fuck down.
And feel it. So actually you're a prime example of that. You're a perfect example. Spring Break 99. Remember I was supposed to come to that.
Yeah.
So what happened was the one time I did not check to make sure that I had my ID on me. I have like a ritual that I go through
before you travel.
And I always check the same things no matter what. And for some odd reason, I skipped checking. And I was like, man, I travel every fucking week. There's no way I can do this shit with my eyes closed. Yeah. And I'm not like that. I'm a very cautious person and I'm a very preventative person. So I went to the airport and I did not have my ID. And this lady was trying to get me through, and it was just a freaking nightmare. And I missed the flight. And I could have easily just bought another flight and went out there. And I was talking to my son about this like 2 weeks ago. And the reason why I didn't come out there was because I'm the kind of person that I do need a punishment. If you give me a nice warning, I can promise you I'm going to do it again. I can promise you. That's just my nature of how asking me nicely has never been. I grew up in a military style like lifestyle, and my dad was in the Army and does not ask nicely. If he did ask me nicely, I wouldn't make any adjustments.
Right.
When he got on me hard, that's when I like took it serious.
Yeah.
So what I do is I punish myself sometimes, even if I get a free pass. I have enough money, I can afford, another plane ticket right off the bat. It would have been $400 or something like that. I needed to feel it. I needed to make sure that like I will never do this again.
Wallow in your mistake, like almost extract
yes.
Yeah,
and actually feel it. You know what I mean? Because I knew I disappointed people by not showing up, and that's what I needed to make sure that like it wouldn't happen again, or especially at a more important time when I actually had to be there. I didn't have to be there. I was just going there to hang out with you guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I sent Adam instead.
Mm-hmm.
But like I needed to feel that, and that's what keeps me from doing it again. And that's what I was telling my son is like, so he missed wrestling practice, a lot of wrestling practices in the morning, and to get him out of bed, he missed like a lot, all of them. I threw water on him. That's when he got out of bed and started getting to practice on time.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I asked you nicely. And then I asked you nicely, and then I asked you nicely, and then I asked you more sternly and more sternly. And none of those times did you get out of bed. But the second that I threw water on you to wake you up, you got up the next morning on time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and it wasn't a problem after that. So you brought me to that level. You know what I mean? That's just your level. You could have accepted it at when I asked you nicely. You just didn't take it serious. That's how I am. I don't take things serious until it's serious.
Yes. I understand that clearly. Yeah. Makes sense. Well, I mean, it's like, you need to make mistakes in order to grow. I mean,
and accept them.
Yeah.
And accept responsibility. If you're coming up with excuses, it's going to happen again. As soon as I'm talking to somebody, they start telling me an excuse of why it happened, I already know it's going to happen again.
They didn't take like personal responsibility for it.
Right.
Yeah. Touche.
Yeah, it's hard to, especially to punish yourself sometimes. You know what I mean? Like,
because your ego is in the way, so you want to defend yourself.
Yeah,
and become defensive
and justify it one way, or I'm human, blah blah blah. I forgot my ID one time, big deal. You know what I mean? Like, but just those adjustments and learning yourself, and I don't know. I always felt like I told my mom this, like, if you're gonna get good at something, get good at life, and then you're kind of good at everything. You know what I mean? So.
Well, in order to get good at life, though, you need to understand yourself.
Yes.
I think that's the start and end to everything.
Yeah.
And having confidence in who you are, because if you do, then nothing around you can, like, if you're comfortable and confident in who you are and yourself, then all the external things can't really shake you off that.
Right.
So I think that a lot of that comes back to like something I was saying before. Like if you're worried about like upsetting somebody, then you might bend. And then you'll become who you're not and put yourself in situations that aren't meant for you.
Yep.
But if you're like firm with like your, standing or like what you believe, then you can stick to it.
Yeah.
And then, like, if that makes any sense.
100%.
Yeah. And then you can like be firm towards your, opinions, choices, or what you say.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's actually a true thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And if it like upsets somebody, then they might go away.
Right.
And that's fine, but that was like someone out of the way that won't resonate with you, or wouldn't have resonated with you.
Right.
So then it kind of just puts you in line with where you should be.
Yeah.
But if you're like moseying around, appeasing and pleasing people, then or things, you're latching on to something that shouldn't have been for you in the first place.
Yeah, and it's probably hurting you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a true fit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you're like making it fit.
Yeah, squeezing it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Food for thought.
Right.
I don't know, man. You think we should wrap it up?
Yeah.
I think it's been a great chat.
Yeah.
I feel like we could probably talk for hours upon hours.
Yeah.
But we just have to do it again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm totally down.
Sweet.
This is fun, man.
Well, I really appreciate you coming down, man.
Yeah.
And doing this.
I like the heat. It wasn't about you. I just needed the heat.
Oh, it's so cold where you're coming from.
Oh, fucking cold.
But it's cold now here.
This is way warmer.
Yeah, I know. You're coming from like probably, it's like, what is it, like 20?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like 60 here right now. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, man, so where can the listeners find you and all that stuff? And
the Instagram is Fine Art First. I never post anything. Used to be at conventions and stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
Look around.
I'm kind of always around somewhere.
You are. You're always lurking quietly in the background with
Right.
a camera.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, just Empire Inks is the main Empire booth or Instagram or something.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, really, thank you again.
Yeah.
Really
absolutely.
an honor.
For sure.
Thank you.